You listen to me right now.
Oh God, what is happening?
The first bone broke at exactly 9:47 a.m. Lieutenant Brad Carson didn't even see her move. 1 second he was laughing, calling the 52-year-old woman standing across from him a useless bitch, loud enough for the entire training facility to hear. The next second he was on his knees, his right elbow hyperextended at an angle. Elbows should never bend, tears streaming down his face as he slapped the mat 3 times in rapid succession. Captain Sarah Mitchell hadn't said a word, hadn't changed expression, hadn't even broken a sweat. She just stood there waiting for the next volunteer. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories of underdogs who prove everyone wrong, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the end of this story. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now let's get back to what happened next. 47 minutes earlier, Sarah had walked through the gates of Fort Coronado Naval Special Operations Training Center, knowing exactly what waited for her. 28 years of service had taught her to read situations before entering them. The mandatory Joint Tactical Evaluation Program, some bureaucrat's brilliant idea to integrate intelligence and operations personnel, was designed to fail people like her. She'd read that in the mission brief subtext, the parts they didn't write down. "Ma'am, you'll need to sign in here." The guard at the security checkpoint was maybe 23 polite enough, but his eyes did that quick up-down assessment every man in uniform seemed programmed to perform. Too old, too small, too female. Sarah signed the roster without comment. "Building 7, ma'am. The briefing starts at 0800. "Thank you." She'd memorized the base layout during the flight from Virginia. Building 7 was the close-quarters combat training facility, which meant this evaluation would be physical. They wanted to see her fail in the most visible, humiliating way possible. Fine. The morning air carried salt from the Pacific Ocean and the distinct scent of military arrogance. Sarah had smelled it on 4 continents in a dozen war zones in rooms where men planned operations they'd never execute themselves. Building 7's entrance was flanked by 2 enormous Marines who barely glanced at her credentials. Inside the main briefing room held approximately 60 personnel, mostly SEALs, some Marine Force Recon, a handful of intelligence officers who looked as uncomfortable as she probably should have felt. She didn't feel uncomfortable, she felt patient. "Well, well, well." The voice came from her left, dripping with theatrical amusement. "They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, aren't they?" Lieutenant Brad Carson. Sarah had studied his file during the cross-country flight. 29 years old. SEAL Team 6-3. Combat deployments. Exemplary. Marksmanship scores. Disciplinary notes for excessive aggression that his commanders had labeled warrior spirit. He stood with 2 other SEALs, all of them radiating the specific brand of confidence that came from never being truly tested. Sarah found a seat in the back row. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Carson's voice grew louder, performing for his audience. "You lost retirement homes about 3 miles north." A few snickers rippled through the room. Sarah placed her tablet on the desk, powered it on, and began reviewing the evaluation protocols. "Dude, maybe she's deaf." This from Petty Officer Jake Matthews, shorter than Carson, but built like a fire hydrant. "Old people lose their hearing, right?" "Nah, she heard me." Carson was walking closer now. Sarah could track his movement in her peripheral vision, his gait slightly favored on the left leg. Old injury, probably a training accident never fully rehabilitated. "She's just being rude. Didn't your generation invent manners or something?" Sarah looked up, made eye contact, said nothing. It unsettled him. She could see it in the micro-expression that flickered across his face, the brief moment where his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Carson, leave it alone." This from an older voice, someone with actual authority. Master Chief Victor Hayes stood near the podium, 65 years old, with a weathered face that had seen combat in 3 different decades. His eyes met Sarah's for a fraction of a second, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or warning. "Just being friendly, Master Chief." Carson raised his hands in mock surrender, but kept talking. "I mean, we're all here to evaluate each other, right? I'm evaluating whether intelligence officers should stick to intelligence work instead of playing soldier." The room's energy shifted. Some people looked uncomfortable now, but plenty were still smiling, waiting to see how this played out. Chief Warrant Officer Ryan Torres leaned against the wall, arms crossed. What's she even doing here? This is a tactical evaluation for operators. She probably hasn't fired a weapon since qualification 20 years ago. 30 years ago, Matthews added, and the room erupted in laughter. Sarah returned her attention to the tablet. The evaluation protocol was straightforward: hand-to-hand combat assessment, tactical planning simulation, live fire exercise, and integrated mission scenario. 4 days of testing designed to identify candidates for a new joint task force. She'd known before boarding the plane that she was the only woman in the candidate pool. She'd known before reading the briefing that the evaluation committee had selected her file specifically to prove a point that intelligence officers, especially older female intelligence officers, didn't belong in tactical operations. They wanted her to quit, to self-select out, to make their case for them. The door at the front of the room opened and Commander Robert Chen entered. He was the evaluation director, 42 years old, with the precise movements of someone who'd never made a mistake he couldn't correct. Attention on deck. Everyone stood. Sarah was the last to rise, moving with deliberate calm. Chen surveyed the room with the expression of a man conducting a necessary but distasteful task. Be seated. We have 4 days to determine which of you will be recommended for Task Force Sentinel. This is not SEAL training. This is not recon training. This is an evaluation of your ability to integrate specialized skills under high-stress conditions. He activated the screen behind him, displaying the evaluation matrix. Your first assessment begins at 0900, close quarters combat, full contact. Medical personnel will be standing by. Carson turned to Matthews and stage whispered, "Guess Grandma's going home with a broken hip." Several people laughed. Chen either didn't hear or chose to ignore it. Master Chief Hayes will be your primary instructor for physical assessments. Commander Mitchell. Chen's eyes found Sarah in the back row. Since you're the ranking intelligence officer present, you'll observe the first round before participating. It was a small mercy they didn't intend as mercy. They wanted her to watch the SEALs demonstrate their superiority before humiliating her. Sarah nodded once. Understood, sir. Dismissed. Report to Combat Training Room 1 in 30 minutes. The room emptied quickly, everyone moving with purpose. Sarah took her time, letting the crowd thin out. She was collecting her tablet when Master Chief Hayes approached. Commander Mitchell? Master Chief. He studied her for a long moment. You know what they're trying to do here? Yes. You know you can withdraw. Medical exemption. No one would question it. Sarah met his eyes. Would you withdraw, Master Chief? A slight smile crossed his weathered face. No, but I'm a stubborn old bastard. Then we have something in common. Hayes glanced toward the door where Carson and his group had exited. Those boys think they know what strength looks like. They're about to get an education. Maybe. Phoenix Protocol. Hayes said it quietly, like a password. That's still classified above my pay grade, but I know it exists. I know what it means. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped. That's not common knowledge, Master Chief. Your husband saved my life. Kandahar 2001. Captain James Mitchell. He never mentioned his wife was Phoenix Actual, but I put pieces together over the years. Hayes's voice carried genuine respect. I promised him I'd watch out for you if anything happened. Then he died protecting my convoy and I couldn't find you. You disappeared into the classified world. The grief was old, but it never fully faded. James wouldn't want you feeling obligated. It's not obligation, it's honor. Hayes straightened. Those boys in there, they're good operators. But they're young, and they've never faced someone like you. Go easy on them. We need fighters, not broken men. I'll do what's necessary, Master Chief. Nothing more. That's what I'm afraid of. Combat Training Room. One was a 50-foot square space with padded floors, mirrors on 3 walls, and enough trauma equipment to handle serious injuries. 20 personnel had gathered to observe, including Carson, Matthews, and Torres, who'd positioned themselves front and center. Sarah entered wearing standard PT gear black shorts, gray t-shirt training shoes. At 5'4" and 130 pounds, she looked exactly like what Carson had called her, a middle-aged woman who had no business in a room full of warriors. Master Chief Hayes stood in the center of the mat. Today's assessment is simple. Close quarters combat, 3-minute rounds, submission, knockout, or surrender ends the match. Medical evaluation after each bout. Any questions? Carson raised his hand. Master Chief, what happens if someone gets hurt? Like seriously hurt? Are we liable? You've all signed medical waivers. Injuries are part of the evaluation. Hayes's expression was unreadable. Anyone unwilling to accept that risk can withdraw now. No one moved. Good. First match, Lieutenant Carson versus... Hayes consulted his tablet. Lieutenant Morrison. For the next 40 minutes, Sarah watched 6 matches. The SEALs were good, technically proficient, aggressive, well-trained, and standard combatives. Morrison lost to Carson in 90 seconds. Matthews dismantled a Marine staff sergeant in under 2 minutes. Torres made a force recon operator tap out from a rear naked choke. They were impressive. They were also predictable. Sarah cataloged everything. Carson telegraphed his combinations with a slight shoulder dip. Matthews had limited flexibility in his right hip, compensating with upper body strength. Torres relied too heavily on his reach advantage, leaving gaps in close-range defense. Commander Mitchell. Hayes's voice pulled her from analysis. You're up. Lieutenant Carson has volunteered to be your partner. Carson was already standing on the mat, rolling his shoulders, loosening up. The room had gone quiet with anticipation. Sarah stood and walked to the mat's edge. She removed her shoes, placed them neatly beside the mirror, and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect Carson didn't return. Master Chief, I don't want to hurt her. Carson's voice carried false concern. Maybe we should modify the rules, light contact only. Commander Mitchell, do you require modified rules? No, Master Chief. Hayes looked between them. Standard rules apply. 3 minutes or submission. Ready. Carson settled into a fighting stance. Hands up, weight balanced. Sarah stood still, hands at her sides, breathing steady. Begin. Carson circled left, and Sarah turned to track him, her movement minimal. He was testing her, watching for tells, looking for openings. You sure you want to do this? Carson asked. It's not too late to quit. No shame in it. Sarah said nothing. Silent treatment. That's mature. He feinted with his left, a quick jab that didn't extend. Sarah didn't react. You know what your problem is. You think your rank means something here. It doesn't. On this mat, you're just another body. He lunged forward with a combination jab, cross-low kick. Sarah slipped the punches and stepped inside the kick's arc, her hands still at her sides. Carson reset, slightly frustrated. Fine. You want to play? Let's play. He attacked with real intent, this time a straight right, designed to overwhelm her guard, followed by a takedown attempt. Sarah moved like water around stone, redirecting his momentum, using his force against him. He stumbled past her, caught himself, spun back. Lucky, he muttered. The room was absolutely silent now. Carson changed tactics, coming in low for a wrestling takedown. He was fast, technically sound, and Sarah let him close the distance. His arms wrapped around her waist, and he lifted, or tried to. Sarah's weight had somehow shifted her balance impossibly low, and suddenly Carson was overextended, his own momentum betraying him. Sarah's hand moved, not fast, not dramatically, just precisely. Her palm struck a pressure point below his right ear, disrupting his equilibrium. Her other hand secured his overextended right arm, controlling the elbow. She pivoted her hips, and Carson's world inverted. He hit the mat hard. The wind knocked from his lungs, and before he could process what had happened, his arm was locked in a position that sent white-hot pain screaming through his nervous system. He had 3 choices: tap out, let his elbow break, or dislocate his shoulder trying to escape. Carson slapped the mat 3 times. Sarah released immediately and stepped back. The entire sequence had taken 47 seconds. Carson rolled to his knees, cradling his arm, his face flushed with pain and humiliation. How did you... Medical check. Hayes was already moving forward with the trauma team. They examined Carson's arm carefully, hyperextended but not broken, painful but functional. Carson stood slowly, his eyes locked on Sarah with a mixture of shock and rage. "I wasn't ready. That was a lucky shot." Sarah remained silent. "You want to go again?" Carson's voice was too loud, too aggressive. "Best 2 out of 3. Lieutenant, you're medically cleared, but you're done for today." Hayes's tone left no room for argument. "Commander Mitchell, are you willing to continue evaluation?" "Yes, Master Chief." Matthews was already standing. "I'll go. Let's see if that was actually skill or just Carson being sloppy." Hayes hesitated, looking between them. "Petty Officer Matthews, you're aware this is a full contact evaluation." "Absolutely, Master Chief." Matthews stepped onto the mat, and there was something different in his demeanor, a cold focus that suggested he wouldn't make Carson's mistakes. "I'm very aware." They faced each other, and this time Matthews didn't bother with psychological warfare. He understood what Carson hadn't. Sarah was dangerous. "Begin." Matthews attacked immediately. No testing, no circling. He came in with a low kick followed by a palm strike combination Muay Thai well executed meant to overwhelm through pressure. Sarah defended with minimal movement, her blocks precise, redirecting rather than absorbing. He pressed forward, mixing strikes and grappling attempts, trying to use his size and strength advantage. Sarah gave ground, letting him push her toward the wall, and the observers probably thought she was being overwhelmed. Carson certainly did. "Come on, Matthews. Take her down." But Master Chief Hayes saw something different. He saw Sarah controlling the distance, limiting Matthews' options, herding him into a position where his strength became a liability. Matthews threw a heavy right cross, committed fully to the power strike. Sarah moved inside it, impossibly close, and her hands flashed to his left knee, the one she'd identified as injured from watching his earlier matches. She didn't strike it. Didn't need to. She just touched it, applied pressure to specific points around the joint, and Matthews' leg buckled. The pain was instantaneous, the old injury flaring to life, and his balance collapsed. Sarah controlled his fall, guided him to the mat, and secured a shoulder lock before he could recover. Matthews was stronger, could probably power out through pure athleticism, but the pain in his knee was overwhelming his tactical thinking. He tapped. 8-9 seconds. The medical team moved in again. Matthews' knee wasn't damaged. Sarah had simply triggered the existing injury through pressure points, but he was limping badly as they helped him off the mat. "How did you know?" Matthews asked, his voice tight with pain. "About my knee." Sarah looked at him for the first time. "You favor it 3 degrees when you pivot right. Old meniscus tear never properly healed. That's in my classified medical record. Your body language isn't classified." Torres was already moving toward the mat, his face dark with anger. "This is bullshit. You're using some kind of what nerve strikes pressure point tricks. That's not real fighting." Hayes stepped between them. "Chief Warrant Officer Torres, you're volunteering." "Damn right I am." Torres was the biggest of the 3 6'2", 220, with the build of someone who lived in the weight room. "And I'm not tapping. Whatever she does, I'll power through it." "Commander Mitchell." Hayes looked at her with an expression that might have been concern. "You're not required to continue." "I'm willing to continue, Master Chief." Hayes studied Torres, seeing the rage barely controlled beneath the surface. "Chief, you understand the rules. This is an evaluation, not a street fight. Control and discipline are required." "I've got plenty of discipline, Master Chief." "Then prove it. Take your position." They faced each other, and Sarah could see Torres trying to calculate her strategy, trying to predict her movement. He was smarter than the others, more patient. He wouldn't rush in blindly. "Begin." Torres advanced slowly, guard high, weight balanced. He threw a careful jab, testing her reactions. Sarah slipped it. He threw another, then a low kick. Sarah checked the kick, absorbed the impact without giving ground. They circled each other, and for 30 seconds, nothing happened. Torres was being cautious, and Sarah was letting him be cautious, reading his patterns, understanding his rhythm. Then Torres committed to a takedown, shooting low and fast, and Sarah sprawled to defend. But Torres had anticipated that he adjusted mid-motion, switching to a different angle, and suddenly his superior size and strength were in play. He secured her in a bear hug from behind, lifting her off the ground. "Got you," he growled, squeezing hard enough to restrict her breathing. Sarah's hands moved to his forearms, and Torres expected her to try to break his grip. Instead, she pressed specific points along his ulnar nerve pathway, not hard enough to cause damage, but precise enough to trigger an involuntary muscle response. Torres's grip weakened for a fraction of a second. That's all Sarah needed. She dropped her weight, slipped down through his arms, and as she fell, her elbow drove backward into his solar plexus. Not full force that would have broken ribs, but enough to disrupt his breathing. Torres gasped, his grip completely broken now, and Sarah spun behind him. What happened next occurred in absolute silence. Sarah's hands moved with clinical precision. A strike to the nerve cluster in Torres's neck, temporarily disrupting the signal between his brain and body. A controlled sweep to his leg, taking him to the mat. A lock on his arm that hyperextended his shoulder, while simultaneously applying pressure to his carotid artery. Torres tried to power out, tried to use his strength, tried everything he'd been taught about escaping submissions. None of it mattered. Sarah applied pressure with mathematical precision, and Torres's consciousness began to fade. His vision tunneled, his muscles stopped responding. He had two choices: tap or go to sleep. Torres went to sleep. 11 seconds. Sarah released the hold immediately and signaled for medical. The trauma team rushed in, checking Torres's vitals, ensuring he hadn't been injured during the loss of consciousness. He came around after a few seconds, confused, disoriented, his face flushed with humiliation. The entire training room was dead silent. 47 SEALs, 23 Marines, 12 instructors. Not one person moved. Master Chief Hayes stepped onto the mat, and his voice carried authority that silenced even the whispers starting to form. "What you just witnessed is classified combat methodology. Commander Mitchell has been cleared to demonstrate it for training purposes, but you are not cleared to replicate it. Is that understood?" A chorus of "Yes, Master Chief," echoed through the room. Hayes turned to Sarah. "Commander, are you willing to continue evaluation, or would you like to break for medical review?" "I'm mission capable, Master Chief." Carson had recovered enough to find his voice, though it came out strained. "What the hell was that? That's not standard combatives. That's Phoenix Protocol." Hayes's voice cut through the confusion. "Developed for CIA Special Activities Division. Commander Mitchell was its lead architect and primary operator for 15 years. She's conducted 89 extractions from hostile territory, eliminated 23 high-value targets, and has more confirmed combat missions than everyone in this room combined." The silence somehow deepened. Matthews was sitting against the wall, still having his knee examined. "The Phoenix Protocol is a myth. That's what they told us in briefings. A ghost story to scare enemy intelligence. The classification status of Phoenix Protocol is above your clearance level, Petty Officer." Hayes looked at each of the three SEALs in turn. "But you've now experienced it firsthand. How you process that information is your concern. How you conduct yourselves going forward is mine." Torres sat up slowly, the medical team still monitoring him. His voice was quiet, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "You could have killed me. Any of us. You were pulling your strikes." Sarah spoke for only the second time since entering the room. "This is an evaluation, Chief, not an execution." "But in the field..." Torres couldn't finish the sentence. "In the field, you wouldn't have woken up." The words hung in the air like smoke. Commander Chen appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Master Chief, I need to speak with you, now." Hayes followed Chen into the hallway, and through the open door, Sarah could hear fragments of their conversation. Completely inappropriate demonstration. Following approved evaluation protocols. 3 injured operators. Medically cleared minor injuries only. Political nightmare if this gets out. The door closed, cutting off the rest. Carson stood and approached Sarah, keeping careful distance. His earlier mockery was gone, replaced by something harder to define. "You embarrassed us, in front of everyone. You embarrassed yourselves, Lieutenant. I just provided the context." What's that supposed to mean? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and Carson had to fight the urge to step back. You walked into this room with assumptions. Age equals weakness. Gender equals incompetence. Rank equals irrelevance. You made those choices, owned those biases, and acted on them without bothering to gather information. We're SEALs. We don't need to. You're operators who just got dismantled by someone you called a useless bitch. Sarah's voice remained level, emotionless. If I had been an enemy combatant, all three of you would be dead. Your teams would be compromised. Your missions would be failures. And the last thing going through your minds would be wondering why you confused prejudice with tactical assessment. Matthews had joined them, limping slightly. So what, we're supposed to treat every middle-aged woman like a potential threat? You're supposed to gather intelligence before making operational decisions. That's basic tradecraft, petty officer. Something my desk job taught me. Torres approached, rubbing his neck where the nerve strike had landed. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine curiosity instead of hostility. Where did you train? Phoenix Protocol isn't taught anywhere in the military pipeline. It isn't taught. It's developed individually based on operator requirements. Sarah's answer was careful, revealing nothing classified. I've studied with Spetsnaz defectors, Israeli Krav Maga instructors, Japanese nerve strike specialists, and close to a dozen other classified programs across 28 years of service. 28 years. Carson's voice had changed, the mockery replaced by something that might have been respect, or might have been resentment. I wasn't even born when you started serving. No, you weren't. The door opened and Master Chief Hayes returned. His expression was unreadable. Commander Mitchell. Commander Chen wants to see you in his office. The rest of you, you're dismissed for the day. Medical evaluations continue at 1400 hours. Sarah gathered her shoes and followed Hayes into the hallway. They walked in silence until they were well away from the training room. That wasn't smart, Hayes said quietly. It was necessary. You could have gone easier on them, made your point without the complete domination. Sarah stopped walking. Master Chief, with respect, those three men called me useless. They mocked my age, my gender, and my service. They did it publicly, deliberately, to establish dominance and humiliate me into quitting. I know. If I had gone easy, they would have learned nothing. They would have claimed I got lucky, or that they held back, or that the rules were unfair. They would have continued to underestimate people like me, and eventually that underestimation would get someone killed. Sarah's voice remained calm, but steel ran through it. I didn't embarrass them. I educated them. There's a difference. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Your husband used to say the same thing. Education through demonstration. He believed people remembered lessons delivered with impact. James was usually right. He also knew when to show mercy. I didn't break any bones, Master Chief. I didn't cause permanent damage. I used exactly enough force to make the point while keeping everyone safe. That's mercy. They resumed walking. Chen's office was in the administration building, a short walk across the compound. Hayes waited until they were outside before speaking again. There's a situation developing. The evaluation's been compromised. How? Someone recorded your matches. The video's already been uploaded to 3 separate secure servers. By tomorrow morning, every special operations unit in the military will have seen it. Sarah processed this. Chen thinks I did it deliberately. A publicity stunt. He's not sure what to think, but he's getting pressure from above to shut this evaluation down before it becomes a political problem. The problem isn't the evaluation, Master Chief. The problem is that 3 SEALs got beaten by someone they considered inferior, and now the institution doesn't know how to handle it. That's one interpretation. What's yours? Hayes smiled slightly. That you're about to find out whether the military really means what it says about merit-based selection. They entered the administration building and the receptionist directed them to Chen's office on the 2nd floor. The door was open and Chen sat behind his desk reviewing something on his computer screen. Commander Mitchell, Master Chief Hayes, close the door. They entered and Hayes closed the door behind them. Chen gestured to the chairs across from his desk, but neither of them sat. I've been reviewing the training room footage, Chen said, his voice carefully neutral. What happened today was unusual. It was a standard evaluation, sir, Sarah replied, conducted according to approved protocols. Standard evaluations don't typically result in 3 injured operators and a potential security breach. The operators weren't injured beyond minor strain, sir. All were medically cleared. As for the security breach that suggests someone in the observation room violated classification protocols. Chen's jaw tightened. You're aware this creates problems. I'm aware it reveals problems that already existed, sir. Explain. Sarah chose her words carefully. This evaluation was designed to demonstrate that intelligence officers lack the tactical capability for field operations. The selection committee chose me specifically because they believed I would fail publicly reinforcing their predetermined conclusions. That's a serious allegation, Commander. It's a factual observation, sir. I'm the only female candidate, the oldest candidate, and the highest-ranking intelligence officer in the pool. My inclusion wasn't random. Chen leaned back in his chair. And you decided to make a statement. I decided to pass the evaluation, sir. The statement made itself. Master Chief Hayes cleared his throat. Commander, if I may. Commander Mitchell followed all protocols. The matches were conducted under standard rules. The medical team cleared all participants. If there's a problem with the outcome, it's not because of any failure on her part. Chen studied them both. I've received 3 calls in the last hour. 2 from SEAL Command, 1 from the SecNav's office. Everyone wants to know who Phoenix is and why she wasn't in their threat assessment briefings. Phoenix protocol is classified above SEAL Command clearance, Sarah said, and threat assessments are for external actors, not Allied personnel. Allied personnel who just humiliated 3 of our top operators. Educated, sir, not humiliated. You put Torres unconscious in 11 seconds. I subdued a hostile operator using approved techniques, sir. In a combat scenario, those 11 seconds would have been enough time to secure valuable intelligence or prevent a mission compromise. Chen rubbed his temples. This is going to get messy, Commander. There are people who want this evaluation terminated, others who want you reassigned, some who want Phoenix Protocol declassified and incorporated into standard training. And what do you want, sir? I want to understand what I'm dealing with. Chen met her eyes directly. Are you here to prove a point, or are you here to serve? I've been serving for 28 years, Commander. This evaluation doesn't change that. Then help me understand something. Chen pulled up a file on his computer. Your service record is heavily redacted. Multiple deployments to classified locations. Commendations. I don't have clearance to read. And a notation that you were removed from active field operations 8 years ago. Why? Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. That's classified, sir. I have SAP clearance. It's above SAP. The room fell silent. Chen closed the file and stood walking to the window that overlooked the training grounds. I'm going to be honest with you, Commander. This evaluation continues or doesn't based on my recommendation. Right now, I'm inclined to shut it down before this situation escalates further. That's your prerogative, sir. But if I do that, 3 operators learn nothing except that the institution protects them from uncomfortable truths. And the next time they underestimate someone, maybe a female insurgent, maybe an older combatant, maybe anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of threat, people die. Yes, sir. Chen turned back to face them. So I'm making a different call. The evaluation continues. Full program, 4 days. But you will conduct yourself with appropriate professional restraint. No more demonstrations designed to make people question their life choices. Understood, sir. And Master Chief, I want a full security review. Find out who recorded that training session and plug the leak. Already on it, sir. Good. You're both dismissed. They left the office and walked back toward the main compound in silence. The afternoon sun was high and the base was busy with the changeover between morning and afternoon shifts. You handled that well, Hayes said finally. Chen's smarter than I expected. He's smart enough to know that shutting you down makes the problem worse. Hayes stopped walking. But you need to understand something, Commander. What happened today, it's going to follow you. Carson, Matthews, Torres. They're embarrassed, angry, and looking for a way to restore their reputation. Let them look. I'm serious. These are good men, but they're also proud men. Pride makes people dangerous. Sarah looked at him steadily. Master Chief, I've survived operations in 14 different countries against enemies who actually wanted me dead. I think I can handle 3 embarrassed SEALs. It's not about survival, it's about what comes after. Hayes's voice carried weight. You've made your point. Now you have to decide whether you want allies or enemies. I want professionals who treat their teammates with respect regardless of age or gender. Then maybe it's time to show them what that looks like. Before Sarah could respond, her secure phone vibrated. She checked the screen and her expression shifted slightly, the first real emotion Hayes had seen from her all day. Problem, he asked. Message from SOCOM Intelligence. Priority classification. Sarah read quickly, her mind already processing implications. There's a situation developing in Yemen. SEAL team pinned down during an extraction. Heavy casualties. Standard rescue protocols aren't viable. Hayes's face went pale. Reynolds. The message doesn't specify team composition, but Sarah pulled up additional details. It's the same operational area where Reynolds conducted his last 3 missions. They'll want Phoenix. They haven't asked yet. Sarah closed the phone. But they will. You going to answer? Sarah looked at the training facility where Carson, Matthews, and Torres were probably still processing what had happened. I haven't been operational in 8 years, Master Chief. There's a reason for that. There's a reason you're still listed as active in the Phoenix database, too. Maybe. Hayes studied her carefully. Your husband would have wanted you to choose service over pride. My husband died choosing service over survival. I'm not sure that's the endorsement you think it is. It's the only endorsement that matters. They stood there in the afternoon sun, 2 career military professionals considering choices that would ripple outward in ways neither could fully predict. Sarah's phone vibrated again. Another message, this one with a priority level she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. She read it twice, then looked at Hayes. They're asking for Phoenix. And I need to make a call. Sarah made the call from a secure room in Building 7, the same facility where she'd dismantled 3 SEALs less than 2 hours earlier. The encryption protocols took 40 seconds to establish, then a voice she hadn't heard in 8 years came through the line. Phoenix, didn't think we'd be using that call sign again. Director Moss, neither did I. You've seen the briefing. Reynolds and his team, Yemen, extraction compromised. It's worse than the initial report. Moss's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent too many years making impossible choices. They've been pinned down for 18 hours. No air support, political complications with the Saudis. No ground reinforcement, the area's too hot. We've got maybe 12 hours before the situation becomes non-recoverable. Sarah pulled up the tactical data on her secure tablet. The numbers were bad. 6 operators, 2 critically wounded, surrounded by an estimated 40 to 60 hostile forces. Standard rescue protocols. All rejected. Risk assessment puts friendly casualties at 70% or higher. SOCOM won't authorize it. So they want Phoenix to go in alone. A pause on the line. Not exactly alone. We need a support team, small footprint, people who can handle themselves if things go sideways. And you're telling me this because you're standing in a room full of SEALs who just learned what happens when they underestimate you. Because 3 of them are about to get a very different kind of education. And because if we're going to pull Reynolds out of hell, we need people who can follow orders without letting their egos get everyone killed. Sarah understood immediately. You want Carson, Matthews, and Torres. I want operators who've been humbled recently enough to still remember the feeling. Pride gets people killed, Phoenix. Fear keeps them sharp. They'll never agree to it. They will if you ask them right. Moss's voice shifted, becoming more direct. Look, we both know why you've been out of the field for 8 years. We both know what happened in Moscow. But Reynolds was part of your last successful extraction before everything went wrong. You owe him. The words hit harder than Sarah expected. Moscow. The operation that had ended her field career. The mission where everything had gone right until the moment it all went catastrophically wrong. That's not fair, Director. War isn't fair, Phoenix. It's just necessary. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Reynolds had been a young lieutenant then, part of the backup team that had extracted her after she'd gotten the asset out but lost 3 operators doing it. He'd carried her to the helicopter while she bled from 2 gunshot wounds, had stayed with her through the emergency surgery. In Germany, had visited her during the 6 months of physical therapy. What's the timeline? Wheels up in 6 hours. Mission briefing in 2. I'm sending the full operational package to your secure tablet now. I haven't agreed yet. Yes, you have. You agreed the moment you made this call. Moss's voice softened slightly. Get your team together, Phoenix. Bring Reynolds home. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the silence of the secure room, staring at the tactical data flooding onto her tablet. The mission was a nightmare: hostile territory, limited intelligence, no backup, high probability of casualties. Everything she'd spent 8 years avoiding. Everything she'd trained her entire career to handle. A knock on the door interrupted her analysis. Master Chief Hayes entered without waiting for permission. The director called me, said you might need help assembling a team. News travels fast. In the special operations community, everything travels fast. Hayes closed the door. Carson, Matthews, and Torres are in the debriefing room. They've been there for the last hour trying to figure out what the hell happened to them today. Are they ready for what comes next? No, but they're ready to try. Hayes pulled up a chair. I told them about Reynolds, about how he and his team are going to die unless someone does something impossible. I didn't mention Phoenix. Didn't mention you specifically. Just said there was a mission that required operators who could handle being the second best person in the room. And they volunteered. Carson said, and I quote, "If there's someone better than me, I want to learn from them before they retire." Matthews said he's tired of being comfortable. Torres just nodded and said he's in. Sarah processed this. They think they're supporting an unknown operator. They think they're supporting the best operator in the military. They don't know that's you yet. When they find out, they'll have 2 choices. Follow orders and maybe save 6 lives, or let their pride kill 8 people instead of 6. Hayes's expression was hard. They're SEALs, Commander. They understand the math. Sarah stood and gathered her tablet. Mission brief in 90 minutes. I need complete background files on all 3 of them. Medical history, psychological evaluations, combat performance records, everything. Already loaded on your tablet. And I need you to do something else. Name it. If this mission goes bad, if we don't come back, I need you to make sure the after-action report is accurate. Not sanitized. Not spun for public relations. Just the truth. Hayes met her eyes. You planning on not coming back? I'm planning for all contingencies, Master Chief. That's what Phoenix does. She left the secure room and walked across the compound toward the debriefing area. Personnel moved around her with the usual base activity, none of them knowing that in 6 hours, 4 people would be boarding a transport to Yemen to attempt something that had a designation in military planning. Type 4 Operation Probable Casualties Mission Success. Uncertain, authorized only when no viable alternatives exist. The debriefing room was small, windowless, with a conference table and secure display screens. Carson, Matthews, and Torres sat in chairs that suddenly seemed too small for their frames, all 3 of them looking like men who'd had their worldview fundamentally adjusted. Sarah entered and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Carson stood immediately. Commander, we didn't expect. Sit down, Lieutenant. He sat. Sarah activated the display screen and pulled up the mission overview, carefully edited to exclude classified details, but showing enough to communicate the severity. 6 operators pinned down in Yemen. Extraction impossible through conventional means. Timeline critical. Questions. Matthews raised his hand like a schoolboy. Ma'am, why are you briefing us on this? Because in 6 hours, the 4 of us are going to board a C-17 to Yemen. We're going to infiltrate hostile territory, reach those 6 operators, and extract them before they're executed or die from their wounds. And we're going to do it without air support, without ground reinforcement, and without the luxury of a backup plan. Silence. Torres found his voice first. The 4 of us against how many hostiles? Current intelligence estimates 40 to 60. Numbers are fluid. That's suicide. That's the mission. Carson leaned forward, his earlier arrogance completely absent. Commander, with respect, why us? There are dozens of operators on this base with more recent combat experience, better physical conditioning, more prejudice. Sarah cut him off. More assumptions, more likelihood of questioning orders because they come from someone they've underestimated. The words landed like artillery rounds. Matthews spoke carefully. You're saying we're being selected because we screwed up today. I'm saying you're being selected because you learned something today. The question is whether you learned enough. Torres stood his voice tight. What exactly are we supposed to have learned, ma'am, that you can beat us in hand-to-hand combat? We get it. You're skilled. You're dangerous. But combat missions aren't martial arts demonstrations. They're chaos, violence, and survival. No offense, but you haven't been in the field for 8 years. Sarah interrupted. I haven't been operational for 8 years, Chief. You're correct. But the man we're going to extract, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reynolds, was part of my last mission. Moscow 2017. I got the asset out. Lost 3 operators doing it. Reynolds carried me to the helicopter after I took 2 rounds in the abdomen. He saved my life while I was bleeding out. The room went quiet. So, yes, I haven't been in the field recently. And yes, you're right that combat is chaos. But Reynolds is going to die unless someone does something, and apparently someone thinks the 4 of us are the best option available. Sarah's voice remained level. You can volunteer for this mission, or you can decline. Either choice is acceptable, but you need to make that choice in the next 60 seconds. Carson looked at Matthews. Matthews looked at Torres. Torres looked at the tactical display showing 6 American operators surrounded by hostile forces in a country most people couldn't find on a map. I'm in, Carson said. Me too, Matthews added. Torres took longer, his eyes moving between the display and Sarah's face. Can I ask a question first? 1. If this goes bad, if we get into a situation where someone needs to make a sacrifice play to get the others out, who makes that call? Sarah met his eyes directly. I do. And the person making the sacrifice will be me, not you. I've lost enough operators, Chief. I'm not losing more. Torres nodded slowly. Then I'm in. Good. Mission brief starts in 1 hour. Until then, you're going to review these files. Sarah transferred data to their tablets. Every word, every detail. Your lives depend on knowing this information. She turned to leave, but Carson's voice stopped her. Commander, what you said earlier about us learning something, what exactly should we have learned? Sarah paused at the door. That competence doesn't correlate with appearance. That experience matters more than physical strength. And that the people you underestimate are often the ones who save your life. She looked back at them. Oh, and one more thing, Phoenix Protocol isn't just a combat system. It's a philosophy. Every movement serves multiple purposes. Every action creates options. Every engagement ends with you controlling what happens next. Is that what you're going to teach us? I'm going to teach you enough to stay alive. The rest you'll learn by watching. Sarah left them with their files and their questions. The hour passed quickly. She spent it reviewing intelligence updates, coordinating with Moss's team, and running through equipment checklists in her mind. The muscle memory was still there, buried under 8 years of desk work and deliberate distance from field work, but accessible when needed. Her secure phone vibrated. A message from Hayes. Transport confirmed. Wheels up at 1900 hours. Medical team briefed. Godspeed, Phoenix. The mission briefing room was larger with sophisticated display systems and direct links to SOCOM command. Sarah arrived first, loading the classified mission files and running through the presentation sequence. Carson, Matthews, and Torres entered together, moving with the quiet professionalism of operators preparing for deployment. They'd changed into field uniforms, and Sarah noticed each of them had made subtle adjustments to their gear. Carson had switched to a different knife configuration. Matthews had added medical supplies to his vest. Torres had modified his communication setup. They were adapting, learning, preparing. Before we start the official brief, I need to address something. Sarah faced them directly. What happened in the training room today that's not going to work in Yemen? I can't demonstrate techniques in the middle of a firefight. I can't stop to explain tactical decisions. You're going to have to trust my calls even when they don't make sense. Follow my lead even when you think there's a better option and accept orders that might contradict your training. You're asking for a lot of trust from people you embarrassed 6 hours ago, Carson said. But there was no hostility in his voice, just observation. I'm asking for professional compliance from operators who understand the stakes. Matthews cleared his throat. Commander, can I ask something that might sound disrespectful? Go ahead. Why are you doing this? You've been out of the field for 8 years. You're senior enough to delegate this mission to someone else. Reynolds may have saved your life once, but you don't owe him. I owe him everything, petty officer. Sarah's voice carried weight that silenced any follow-up questions. Reynolds didn't just carry me to that helicopter. He stayed with me during surgery when the doctor said I had a 20% chance of survival. He called my son when I was in a coma and couldn't tell him myself that I might not wake up. And when I did wake up, when I learned that 3 operators had died getting that asset out, Reynolds was the one who told me it wasn't my fault. She paused, letting them absorb this. So, yes, I owe him. But this mission isn't about debt. It's about the fact that 6 American operators are going to die unless someone with specific skills executes a very dangerous plan. I have those skills. You 3 have the tactical capability to support that plan. Together we might pull this off. Torres spoke quietly. What are our odds? Honest assessment. 40% chance of mission success. 60% chance of casualties. 15% chance of complete mission failure resulting in total loss. Those are terrible odds. Yes, which is why I'm only bringing people who've already proven they can handle being outmatched. Sarah activated the display. Now let's talk about how we improve those odds. The briefing took 90 minutes. Sarah walked them through every phase of the operation: infiltration via high-altitude, low-opening jump into the mountains northeast of the target area, 12-kilometer approach, march through hostile territory breach and extraction during a narrow window of opportunity, exfiltration to a pickup zone that would only be available for 7 minutes. She showed them satellite imagery, thermal scans, intelligence reports on enemy force composition and capabilities. She outlined the primary plan, 2 backup plans, and the emergency extraction protocol that basically amounted to run and hope. Carson studied the approach route. This path takes us through a village. Why not bypass to the north? Northern route adds 2 hours to our timeline. Reynolds doesn't have 2 hours. But the village is occupied. Intelligence shows at least 20 military-age males. Correct. Which is why we're going through at 0300 hours when most of them will be asleep, and why our movement protocol requires absolute silence for that entire section. Matthews pointed to the extraction point. This is completely exposed, no cover, no concealment. If we're taking fire when the helicopter arrives, then we suppress and maneuver. The helicopter has a 7-minute window. We use 6 minutes and 30 seconds of it if we have to. Torres was examining the enemy force disposition. These fighters have anti-air capabilities. How is the helicopter getting in? Nap of the Earth flight profile using terrain masking. They'll be flying 15 feet off the ground through mountain valleys. It's dangerous, it's difficult, and it's the only option that doesn't get them shot down before they reach us. And if they don't make it, Sarah met his eyes. Then we're walking to Saudi Arabia. It's 140 miles through hostile territory. I give us about a 10% chance of making it. The room fell silent again. Any other questions? Carson raised his hand. Yeah, how do we know you can still do this? No disrespect, Commander, but 8 years out of the field is a long time. What if you've lost a step? It was a fair question, and Sarah had been expecting it. I haven't lost anything that matters, Lieutenant. But if you need proof, we can stop by the range on the way to the transport. I'll show you what 8 years of desk work looks like. They stopped by the range. Sarah requested targets at 25, 50, and 100 meters. She selected a standard issue M4 from the armory, checked it with practiced efficiency, and addressed the range officer. Mixed scenario, multiple targets, random sequence, maximum difficulty. The range officer looked skeptical, but programmed the system. Targets would pop up unpredictably across all 3 distances, requiring rapid target acquisition, immediate fire discipline, and perfect accuracy under pressure. The buzzer sounded. Sarah's first round was downrange before Carson registered the target had appeared. Center mass. The target dropped and another appeared at 50 meters. 2 rounds, both center mass. A third target at 100 meters headshot because the scenario required it. Then 2 targets simultaneously at different distances, and Sarah engaged both in a sequence so smooth it looked choreographed. 15 targets, 15 seconds, 0 misses. She cleared the weapon and placed it on the bench, then turned to the 3 SEALs who were staring at the target display like it had personally insulted them. Satisfied? Matthews found his voice first. That was perfect. Every single shot. It was adequate, petty officer. Perfect would have been 12 seconds. Sarah picked up her gear. Transport leaves in 40 minutes. I suggest you use that time for final equipment checks and personal preparation. Once we're wheels up, there's no turning back. They made it to the transport with 20 minutes to spare. The C-17 was already loaded with their equipment, weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, communications gear, everything needed for a deep penetration raid into hostile territory. The loadmaster briefed them on jump procedures, emergency protocols, and what to do if something went wrong at altitude. As the transport taxied toward the runway, Sarah found herself sitting across from 3 operators who 6 hours earlier had called her useless. Now they were preparing to follow her into a mission that might kill all of them, trusting her judgment, accepting her leadership. Carson caught her looking at them. "Something on your mind, Commander?" "Just thinking about perspective, Lieutenant. How quickly things change." "No kidding." He adjusted his harness. "This morning I thought I knew what strength looked like. Turns out I didn't know anything." Matthews nodded agreement. "My old instructor used to say, pride comes before the fall. I always thought it was just a saying. Didn't realize it was a warning." Torres was quieter, his eyes distant. "My father was Special Forces. Served 3 tours in Vietnam. He used to tell me that the most dangerous enemy was the one you didn't respect. I thought he meant don't underestimate the enemy's weapons or tactics." He looked at Sarah. "He meant don't underestimate the enemy, period. Doesn't matter what they look like, how old they are, whether they fit your mental image of a threat. All that matters is capability. Your father was right, Chief. He also said that warriors who can't learn from defeat don't deserve to survive the next battle. He was right about that too." The transport's engines roared to full power and the massive aircraft began its takeoff roll. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of acceleration, the moment of weightlessness as the wheels left the runway, the steady climb as they headed east toward Yemen, and a mission that existed in the space between necessary and impossible. 6 hours of flight time. 6 hours to review plans, check equipment, and prepare mentally for what was coming. Sarah used the time to study updated intelligence reports. The hostile force had grown to an estimated 70 fighters. Reynolds' team had lost another operator to wounds. The window for extraction had narrowed to 8 hours. Everything was getting worse. Carson noticed her expression. "Bad news. Another KIA. 5 operators left 2 critical condition. Enemy force larger than initial estimates. So our 40% success rate just dropped to about 35%, yes." Matthews looked up from his weapon maintenance. "Commander, can I ask something tactical?" "Go ahead." "This mission Phoenix protocol, your specific skills. How much of success depends on you versus the team?" Sarah considered the question carefully. In a conventional assault, success might be 70% team capability, 30% leadership. In this mission, it's reversed, maybe more. "I'm going to be doing things you can't do, making decisions faster than you can follow, exploiting opportunities you won't see. Your job is to trust that I know what I'm doing and support the plan, even when it looks insane." "That's a lot of pressure on you." "I've handled pressure before, petty officer." "In Moscow, the mission you mentioned." Sarah didn't answer immediately. The Moscow operation was still classified, still painful, still the reason she'd spent 8 years behind a desk instead of in the field. But these 3 operators were about to trust her with their lives. They deserved context. Moscow was a hard target extraction. High-value asset deep inside FSB territory, 0 margin for error. The plan was good. The intelligence was solid. The execution was flawless up until the moment everything went wrong. She paused, memories flooding back. "We extracted the asset successfully. Got him to the rally point. But the Russians had anticipated our exfiltration route. They were waiting." Torres leaned forward. What happened? I made a choice. Sent the asset ahead with half the team while I stayed back with the others to create a diversion. The diversion worked. The Russians focused on us, let the asset escape, but it cost 3 operators their lives and put me in a hospital for 6 months. Reynolds was part of the team that got away. Reynolds was part of the backup team that came back for us, against orders. He could have been court-martialed for it. Instead, he saved the 4 of us who were still alive and extracted under fire while I bled out in his arms. The transport hit turbulence and the aircraft shuddered. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Carson asked the question they were all thinking. Commander, if this mission goes bad like Moscow did, if we're in the same situation where someone has to stay behind, you said you'd be the one to make the sacrifice. But what if that's not the tactically sound choice? What if the mission requires someone else to be the diversion? Sarah met his eyes. Then I'll make that call, Lieutenant, and whoever I choose will follow orders. But I can promise you this, I won't ask anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself. And if there's any way to bring everyone home, I'll find it. Even if it means anything. I've already lost 3 operators, Carson. I've spent 8 years living with that. I'm not adding to the count if I can avoid it. The loadmaster appeared from the cockpit. Commander Mitchell, we're 2 hours from the drop zone. You'll want to start final preparations. 2 hours. 120 minutes until they jumped into darkness over hostile territory to attempt something that shouldn't be possible. Sarah stood and began her pre-jump routine, checking her parachute, testing her communications equipment, verifying her weapons were properly secured. Carson, Matthews, and Torres did the same, their movements synchronized from years of training and recent humility. One more thing, Sarah said as they worked. When we're on the ground, call signs only. I'm Phoenix. Carson, your Razor. Matthews, your Atlas. Torres, your Titan. We use nothing else on the radio. Clear. Clear. And if something happens to me, if I'm injured, captured, or killed, the mission priority remains extraction of Reynolds and his team. You do not abort to rescue me. You do not deviate from the plan. You complete the objective. Understood. Silence. I need verbal confirmation. Understood. Carson said, his voice tight. Understood. Matthews echoed. Torres took longer. Understood, Phoenix. But for the record, we don't like those orders. You don't have to like them, Titan. You just have to follow them. The final hour passed in focused preparation. Each of them retreated into that mental space operators inhabited before combat, a place of clarity, purpose, and controlled fear. Sarah had been there hundreds of times, but 8 years away hadn't diminished the intensity. If anything, it was sharper now, more immediate, more real. The loadmaster returned. 15 minutes to drop zone. Weather is clear, winds are acceptable. Hostile radar shows no unusual activity. You're green across the board. They moved to the jump door, checking each other's equipment one final time. Outside, the night was absolute, no moon, no stars visible, just darkness and the sound of the C-17's engines. 5 minutes. Sarah ran through the plan one last time in her mind. Jump at 25,000 feet. Free fall to 4,000 deploy chutes. Land in the mountains. 12-kilometer approach. March. Breach the enemy position. Extract Reynolds' team. Reach the pickup zone. Survive long enough for the helicopter to arrive. Simple. Impossible. Necessary. 1 minute. The jump light turned yellow. Sarah positioned herself at the door, feeling the wind, gauging the conditions, preparing her body for what came next. Carson moved beside her. Phoenix. Yeah. Thank you. For choosing us. For trusting us after what we said earlier. Thank you for being willing to learn Razor. The light turned green. Sarah jumped into darkness and 3 Navy SEALs followed her without hesitation. The free fall lasted 93 seconds that felt like forever and no time at all. Sarah's altimeter read 4,000 feet and she pulled her chute, feeling the familiar jolt as the canopy deployed. 3 other chutes blossomed in the darkness around her, Carson, Matthews, and Torres following exactly as trained. Radio check. Sarah said into her throat mic. Razor, good shoot. Atlas, good shoot. Titan, good shoot. Whoa. They steered toward the landing zone, a narrow valley between two ridges that satellite imagery had identified as clear. Sarah hit the ground first, executing a textbook landing and immediately collapsing her chute. The others landed within 30 seconds, and they worked in practiced silence to bury the chutes under rocks and loose soil. Carson pulled out his GPS and checked their position. We're 200 meters south of the planned landing zone. Acceptable variance. Atlas established comms with command. Titan security perimeter. Razor equipment check. They moved efficiently, and Sarah felt the familiar rhythm of operational work settling over her. 8 years hadn't eroded the muscle memory, the instincts, the clarity that came from having a mission and the skills to execute it. Matthews worked his radio cycling through frequencies until he found the secure channel. Command, this is Atlas. 4 personnel on ground, all mission capable. Requesting status update on primary objective. Static. Then a voice. Sarah recognized Director Moss. Atlas, glad to hear your voice. Status update is not good. Reynolds' team has lost another operator. 4 remaining, 3 wounded. You're down to a 6-hour window. Sarah took the radio. Phoenix actual. What changed in the last 2 hours? Hostile forces located their position. They're under active siege. Reynolds is holding them off, but ammunition is critical. He's got maybe 3 hours of defensive capability left. Understood. We're moving to double time on the approach. Phoenix, one more thing. Intelligence indicates the hostile commander is Hassan al-Rifai. You've encountered him before. Sarah's blood went cold. Confirmed. Facial recognition from drone footage. It's him. She handed the radio back to Matthews and turned to find all 3 SEALs staring at her. Problem? Torres asked. Hassan al-Rifai is a Yemeni warlord. Former special forces trained by the Russians, responsible for the deaths of at least 30 coalition operators over the last decade. He's smart, ruthless, and he knows how Americans think. Carson's face was grim. You've faced him before. Syria, 2015. He ambushed my convoy, killed 2 of my team before we fought our way out. He's been on the target list ever since. But he's careful, rarely exposes himself. If he's personally commanding the siege on Reynolds, he knows it's important, Matthews finished. He's making a statement. Exactly. Which means our approach just got significantly more dangerous. Al-Rifai will have counter-surveillance, multiple security rings, and contingency plans for any rescue attempt. Torres checked his weapon. So what's the play? We adapt, move faster, hit harder, exploit any gaps we find. And we hope Al-Rifai's arrogance creates an opening. Sarah activated her night vision and oriented toward their target. 12 kilometers. We've got terrain advantage for the first 8. Then it's open ground. We move in tactical silence until we reach the village, then it's complete blackout, no comms, no sound, nothing that gives away our position. They moved out, and Sarah set a punishing pace. The terrain was brutal, loose rocks, steep inclines, narrow passages between boulders that required careful navigation. But they were operators trained for this, and they covered ground quickly. 2 kilometers in Carson's voice came through the radio. Movement 10 o'clock, 300 meters. Everyone froze. Sarah scanned the area and spotted them 2 fighters armed with AK-47s moving along a parallel ridge. Patrol most likely checking the approaches to the village. They haven't seen us, Matthews whispered. We can bypass to the south. Negative, Sarah said quietly. If they continue their current path, they'll cross our planned route. We deal with them now. Phoenix, we're trying to maintain stealth, which is why we're doing this quietly. Razor, Atlas, maintain position. Titan, you're with me. Sarah moved without waiting for acknowledgement, and Torres followed. They covered the distance in 4 minutes using terrain and darkness for concealment. The 2 fighters were smoking cigarettes, talking in low voices, completely unaware of the danger approaching from below. Sarah signaled Torres to take the one on the left. She'd handle the right. They closed the final 20 meters in absolute silence, and Sarah's mind shifted into that space where time seemed to slow and every movement became precise. She rose behind her target and struck one hand covering his mouth, the other applying pressure to his carotid artery. The fighter struggled for maybe 3 seconds before consciousness faded. Sarah lowered him to the ground, carefully ensuring no noise. Torres had done the same with his target, and they zip-tied both fighters' hands and feet, gagging them with their own scarves. 2 tangos neutralized non-lethal, Sarah reported as they rejoined the others. But we need to assume they'll be missed when they don't report in. How much time does that give us? Carson asked. Maybe an hour, maybe less if Al-Rifai is running a tight operation. They increased their pace, covering the next 6 kilometers in 48 minutes. The village appeared ahead, a cluster of single-story buildings arranged around a central square. Intelligence had estimated 20 military-age males, but Sarah counted at least 30 from their vantage point. Numbers are wrong, Matthews whispered. That's 50% more than briefed. Al-Rifai brought reinforcements. He's preparing for something. Sarah studied the village layout, her mind calculating routes, identifying threats, assessing options. We're going through the western edge. There's a narrow alley between 2 buildings, looks like it's being used for storage. Low traffic, minimal observation. Torres pulled up his thermal imaging. Confirmed. I'm reading 2 heat signatures in the building on the left, none in the right. The alley's clear. They approached the village with extreme caution, every step deliberate, every movement calculated. Sarah went first. Her breathing controlled her senses, hyper-alert for any indication of discovery. The alley was 10 feet wide and 30 feet long, cluttered with supply crates and old equipment. Halfway through, a door opened in the building to their left, and light spilled into the alley. Sarah froze. Behind her, she heard the others stop breathing. A fighter emerged, stretching, yawning. He was maybe 20 feet away. If he looked in their direction, the mission was over. Sarah's hand moved to her knife, prepared for violence she desperately wanted to avoid. The fighter lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and spoke to someone inside the building in Arabic. Sarah understood every word he was complaining about guard duty, about the cold, about missing his family. Human concerns from someone who would kill them without hesitation if he knew they were there. The fighter finished his cigarette, flicked it into the alley. It landed 3 feet from Matthews and went back inside. They waited 30 seconds. Then Sarah moved forward again and they cleared the village without further incident. On the far side, the terrain opened up into rocky wasteland. 4 kilometers ahead, Reynolds and his team were fighting for survival. Command, this is Phoenix. We're clear of the village. Request current status on primary objective. Moss's voice came back immediately. Phoenix, Reynolds just reported they're down to last magazines. Enemy is preparing for final assault. You've got maybe 90 minutes before it's over. Understood. We're moving to sprint pace. Sarah broke into a run, and the 3 SEALs matched her stride for stride. 4 kilometers over rough terrain at night was a brutal ask, but they didn't have a choice. Reynolds didn't have time for careful approaches. They covered the distance in 23 minutes, arriving at a rocky outcropping that overlooked the siege position. Sarah dropped to her stomach and brought up her optics. What she saw made her blood run cold. Reynolds' team was holed up in a collapsed building surrounded by at least 60 fighters. 3 technical vehicles with mounted heavy machine guns had the position bracketed. Mortar crews were setting up for indirect fire. And coordinating everything from a command vehicle 200 meters back was Hassan al-Rifai himself. "This is bad," Carson whispered. "We can't assault that. 4 operators against 60. That's not brave, it's stupid." Sarah continued scanning the battlefield, her mind processing information faster than she could articulate. "We're not assaulting, we're creating chaos." "Explain." "The enemy has overwhelming force, but they're relying on that force for security. They're not expecting a threat from outside the siege. We exploit that complacency." Sarah pointed to the mortar crews. "Atlas, you take out those mortars. Use your explosives, make it loud. That's our diversion." Matthews nodded. "Where will you be?" "Razor and I are going for al-Rifai's command vehicle. If we eliminate him, the command structure collapses." Torres looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Phoenix, you're talking about cutting through enemy positions to reach a hardened target. That's suicide." "It's misdirection. When Atlas hits the mortars, everyone's attention goes there. Razor and I use that window to close distance on al-Rifai. Titan, you provide overwatch and be ready to suppress targets of opportunity." "And after we hit our targets," Carson asked, "we link up with Reynolds, consolidate position, and hold until extraction. The helicopter is scheduled to arrive in 97 minutes. We just need to survive that long." Matthews checked his explosives. I can be in position in 10 minutes. After that, it's just a matter of not getting shot while I plant the charges. Use the chaos from the other explosions to mask your movement. Plant, withdraw, detonate. Then, get to the rally point. Sarah looked at each of them. This is going to be loud, violent, and confusing. Stay focused on your objectives. Trust your training. And remember, we're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to buy time. They separated into their elements. Matthews moved toward the mortar position with the focused intensity of someone who understood exactly how dangerous his task was. Torres found a sniper position with clear sight lines across the battlefield. Carson stayed with Sarah as they began their approach to the command vehicle. Phoenix, Carson said quietly as they moved. If this goes bad, it's not going bad, Razor. We're going to execute extract and get everyone home. But if it does, then you follow orders. Get to Reynolds. Get him to the extraction point. Don't stop for me. They covered half the distance when Matthew's voice came through the radio. Atlas in position. Charges set. Ready to execute on your command. Sarah could see Al-Rifai, now standing beside his vehicle, directing his forces with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. She recognized his stance, his gestures, the way he commanded without raising his voice. Titan, what's your status? Overwatch established. I've got clear shots on multiple targets, waiting on your signal. Sarah and Carson were 70 meters from the command vehicle. 60, 50. Execute in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, execute. Matthews detonated his charges, and the night exploded. The mortar position erupted in a fireball that lit up the entire battlefield. Fighters shouted in confusion, running toward the explosion, abandoning their positions. Sarah and Carson sprinted forward using the chaos for cover. They were 30 meters from Al-Rifai when one of his guards spotted them. The guard raised his weapon, and Carson shot him twice center mass, professional clean. But the sound drew attention. More guards turned toward them, weapons coming up. Sarah didn't slow down. She closed the distance on the nearest guard and disarmed him with a movement so fast the man didn't have time to process it. Her knee struck his solar plexus, and he dropped. She used his falling body as cover while Carson engaged 2 more guards. Al-Rifai was moving toward his vehicle, shouting orders, trying to regain control of the situation. Sarah had maybe 5 seconds before he reached safety. She drew her sidearm and fired 3 times, not at Al-Rifai, but at the vehicle's tires and engine block. The vehicle lurched as the tires blew, and steam erupted from the damaged engine. Al-Rifai spun toward her, and recognition flashed across his face. You. Me. He reached for his weapon, but Sarah was faster. She closed the distance and struck his wrist, sending his pistol flying. He recovered quickly. He was trained, skilled, dangerous, and launched a counterattack that would have killed most people. But Sarah wasn't most people. She absorbed his first strike, redirected his second, and countered with a precision strike to his knee that dropped him. Before he could recover, she had him in a control hold, her weapon pressed against his temple. Order your forces to stand down! Al-Rifai laughed, blood on his teeth. Kill me! It changes nothing. My men will slaughter your friends. Razor status, Sarah said into her radio while maintaining pressure on Al-Rifai. 4 guards down, more incoming. We've got maybe 30 seconds before we're overrun. Torres's voice cut in. Titan engaging, suppressing approaching forces. Rifle fire cracked from Torres's position, and Sarah heard screams as his shots found targets. But there were too many fighters, and they were converging from multiple directions. Sarah made a decision. She stood pulling Al-Rifai up with her and shouted in Arabic. I have your commander. Anyone who advances dies along with him. The approaching fighters hesitated, uncertain. Phoenix, we need to move, Carson urged. Reynolds's position is taking heavy fire. If we don't link up now... An explosion rocked the battlefield, not from Matthews's charges, but from Reynolds's position. The building they were defending had taken a direct hit from one of the technical vehicles. Command, this is Titan. Reynolds's position is compromised, I'm seeing. Torres's voice went tense. I've got personnel exiting the building. 3, no 4 operators. They're mobile, but taking fire from multiple directions. Sarah's mind calculated instantly. They were 200 meters from Reynolds' position. The extraction point was another 300 meters beyond that. The helicopter was scheduled to arrive in 74 minutes, and they were surrounded by hostile forces that outnumbered them 15-1. She spoke into her radio with absolute clarity. All elements new plan. We're creating a corridor. Titan, suppress the technical vehicles. Razor, you're with me. We're going to get Reynolds and punch through to the extraction point. Atlas, meet us there. Phoenix, we're leaving Al-Rifai, Carson asked. Sarah drove her knee into Al-Rifai's back, slamming him face first into the ground. He's no longer useful. She zip-tied his hands with brutal efficiency. Move. They ran toward Reynolds' position, and Torres's suppressive fire carved a path through the chaos. Sarah saw Reynolds first. He was half carrying another operator, blood covering both of them, moving with the determination of someone who refused to die. Reynolds! Sarah shouted. He turned, and even through the darkness and smoke, recognition hit him. Mitchell! What the hell are you? Explanations later. How many mobile? 4, including me. 2 critical wounded. I've got 1 dead. I won't leave behind. Sarah processed this. Carrying a body would slow them significantly, but she understood the principle. No one left behind. Get your people moving to extraction point Charlie. We've got 72 minutes to get there. We're cut off on 3 sides. Not anymore. Titans providing Overwatch. Atlas is clearing the route. Razor and I are your rear guard. Move your people now. Reynolds didn't argue. He shouted orders to his remaining team, and they began moving. 1 operator was unconscious, being carried by another. The 3rd was mobile but clearly hurt, limping badly. And Reynolds himself was carrying their fallen teammate in a fireman's carry. Sarah and Carson fell back to cover their movement, engaging targets that Torres couldn't reach from his position. The hostile forces were recovering from the initial chaos, reorganizing, preparing to pursue. Matthews appeared from the darkness, breathing hard. Charges expended, moving to extraction point. Holy hell, is that Reynolds? Keep moving, Atlas. We've got company. Fighters were pursuing now, and Sarah could see more technical vehicles repositioning to cut off their escape route. They had maybe 3 minutes before they'd be surrounded again. Titan, we need fire on those technicals, Sarah shouted. I'm out of position. They're behind cover from my angle. Sarah made another snap decision. Razor, take point with Reynolds. Get everyone to the extraction point. Atlas, go with them. Phoenix, what are you? I'm buying time. Go. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She turned and sprinted toward the nearest technical vehicle, her mind already calculating angles and possibilities. The vehicle was moving to intercept Reynolds' group, its mounted machine gun tracking targets. Sarah reached into her vest and pulled out her last flashbang grenade. She got within 30 meters of the technical before anyone saw her, and when they did, she threw the grenade directly under the vehicle. The explosion was deafening. The vehicle lurched sideways, temporarily disabled. Its crew disoriented. Sarah used those precious seconds to reach another position. Draw fire, make herself the priority target. Bullets tore through the air around her, impacting rocks and dirt, close enough that she felt the displacement. She returned fire with controlled bursts, not trying to kill, but to suppress, to delay, to buy Reynolds those critical minutes he needed. Her radio crackled. Phoenix, this is Titan. I'm relocating to provide better coverage on your position. Hold for 30 seconds. 30 seconds. An eternity under fire. Sarah dropped behind a boulder as a stream of machine gun fire tore through the space she'd just occupied. She counted rounds, listened to the pattern, waited for the reload cycle. When it came, she moved to a new position, fired twice, and dropped again before return fire arrived. Phoenix. Carson's voice was urgent. Reynolds' team is at the extraction point. We're set for defense, but you need to get here now. Copy. Titan. I'm moving to you, then we extract together. Sarah began a fighting withdrawal, leapfrogging between positions, using terrain and darkness to mask her movement. She could hear Torres's rifle now providing covering fire, keeping the pursuing forces cautious. She reached his position 45 seconds later, breathing hard, but still combat effective. Nice timing, Torres said, continuing to fire. I was starting to think you'd decided to take them all on yourself. Considered it. Decided the odds weren't quite good enough. Sarah checked her ammunition. 1 magazine remaining. How many rounds do you have? Maybe 60. After that, we're down to harsh language. Then let's not waste them. Controlled retreat to the extraction point. I'll lead you cover. Move in 15-second intervals. They covered the 300 meters in less than 3 minutes, arriving at the extraction point to find Carson Matthews and Reynolds' team established in a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. Reynolds looked up as Sarah approached, and despite the blood and exhaustion, he smiled. Phoenix protocol in action. Thought I'd never see it again. Thought I'd never use it again. Looks like we were both wrong. Who are these guys? Reynolds gestured to Carson Matthews and Torres. Long story. Short version, they're learning what it means to be part of a team. Carson approached, his expression serious. Phoenix, we've got movement on 3 sides. I'm counting at least 40 fighters regrouping for another assault. Helicopter isn't scheduled for another 68 minutes. We don't have enough ammunition to hold that long. Sarah surveyed their position. It was defensible, but far from ideal, an open area with minimal cover exposed from multiple angles. Holding for over an hour against a sustained assault wasn't just difficult, it was nearly impossible. Then we make them think twice about assaulting. How? Sarah pulled out her radio and switched to the frequency she'd memorized years ago. Hassan al-Rifai, this is Phoenix. I know you're listening. Static, then his voice tight with rage. You humiliated me. You destroyed my command vehicle. You will die for this. Maybe. But not before I destroy your reputation. I've uploaded video footage of our encounter to 3 separate intelligence databases. By morning, everyone will know that the great Hassan al-Rifai was defeated by a woman, a middle-aged American woman. That's going to be hard to live down in your circles. Silence on the radio. Sarah could almost feel his rage through the speaker. Here's my offer, she continued. You let us extract peacefully, and the video stays classified. Your reputation remains intact. You try to stop us, and I guarantee that footage goes viral across every intelligence network in the Middle East. You're bluffing. You want to bet your reputation on that? More silence. Then 1 hour. You have 1 hour to leave. After that, no deals. The radio went dead. Reynolds stared at her. Did you actually upload footage? No, but he doesn't know that, and his ego won't let him risk it. Sarah checked her watch. We've got 67 minutes to survive. He'll honor the hour, but the second it expires, he'll hit us with everything. Matthews laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. You just bluffed a warlord into giving us time. That's insane. That's Phoenix protocol. Every action creates options. Even defeat can become leverage if you understand human psychology. They spent the next hour reinforcing their position, treating the wounded, and preparing for extraction. Reynolds' team was in bad shape, 1 dead, 2 critically wounded, the rest operating on adrenaline and determination. I lost Martinez, Reynolds said quietly, looking at the operator they'd carried from the battlefield. He took a round meant for me, just stepped in front without hesitating. He was doing his job, protecting his team leader. Same thing you did in Moscow, staying behind so the asset could escape. Sarah didn't respond. I never thanked you for that, Reynolds continued. For making the call that saved half the team, even though it cost you everything. It cost 3 operators their lives, Reynolds. That's not something worthy of thanks. Those 3 operators knew the risks. They chose to stay with you. That choice mattered. Before Sarah could respond, Torres's voice cut through. Helicopter inbound, 2 minutes. Everyone moved into extraction positions. The wounded were prepped for rapid loading. Weapons were oriented outward, ready to suppress any last-minute assault. The helicopter appeared low and fast, using terrain masking exactly as briefed. It flared hard and touched down, rotors still spinning, and the loadmaster was waving them forward. Load the wounded first, Sarah ordered. Then the KIA mobile operators provide security. They moved with practiced efficiency, getting Reynolds' casualties aboard in under a minute. Carson and Matthews hauled Martinez's body into the helicopter with appropriate reverence. Phoenix, we're loaded, the loadmaster shouted over the rotor noise. Let's go, Sarah counted heads. Reynolds' 4 survivors, plus Martinez's body, plus Carson Matthews Torres herself. Everyone accounted for. Load up, we're leaving. They scrambled aboard, and the helicopter was lifting before the doors were fully closed. Sarah looked down at the landing zone and saw what she'd expected. Hostile forces breaking cover, rushing forward, firing at the departing aircraft. But they were too late. The helicopter banked hard, dropped into a valley, and used the terrain to mask their escape. Within 90 seconds, they were clear of effective small arms range. Reynolds slumped against the bulkhead, his face gray with exhaustion and blood loss. "We made it. I can't believe we actually made it." Sarah was checking the wounded, ensuring they were stable for the flight. One of them, a young petty officer who couldn't have been more than 25, grabbed her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "I thought we were dead. I thought—" "You're not dead, petty officer. You're going home." The flight to the nearest medical facility took 40 minutes. Reynolds' team was transferred immediately to trauma care, and doctors were reasonably optimistic about the 2 critical wounded making full recoveries. Sarah, Carson, Matthews, and Torres were directed to a debriefing room where Director Moss was waiting via secure video link. "Phoenix, good to see you alive." "Good to be alive, Director." "I've reviewed the preliminary after-action reports. Unconventional tactics, significant risks, mission success against overwhelming odds." Moss paused. "It's exactly what I expected from you. The question is whether this was a one-time operation or a return to active status." Sarah felt Carson, Matthews, and Torres watching her, waiting for her answer. "I don't know, Director. Ask me again when I'm not running on adrenaline and 20 hours without sleep." "Fair enough. But before you disappear for another 8 years, I want you to know something. Those 3 SEALs you brought with you. They filed preliminary reports using language I haven't seen from operators in a decade. Words like humbled, educated, and honored to serve with. You changed something in them. They changed something in themselves. I just provided context. However you want to frame it, Phoenix, the result is 3 better operators and 6 saved lives. That's a good day's work." Moss signed off, and the screen went dark. Sarah stood to leave, but Carson's voice stopped her. "Commander, can we talk for a minute?" She turned to find all 3 of them standing, their expressions serious. "This morning," Carson began, his voice careful, "I called you a useless bitch. I mocked your age, questioned your capability, and dismissed your value based on assumptions I never bothered to verify. I'm aware, Lieutenant. And then you spent the last 12 hours saving my life repeatedly. You trusted us with a mission we hadn't earned the right to participate in. You put yourself at risk to ensure we all came home." He paused. "I don't know how to apologize for that kind of failure." Matthew stepped forward. "I've been a SEAL for 8 years. I thought I knew what strength looked like, what courage meant, what service required. You showed me I didn't know anything." Torres was last. "My father told me that true warriors don't need to prove they're warriors. They just serve. I didn't understand that until today." Sarah looked at each of them, seeing not the arrogant operators from the training room, but professionals who'd been tested and emerged different. "You want my forgiveness?" she asked. "We want your respect," Carson said, "or at least the opportunity to earn it. You earned it the moment you jumped out of that transport despite knowing the odds. Everything after that was just confirmation." Sarah moved toward the door. "Get some rest. Process what happened. And the next time you encounter someone you're tempted to underestimate, remember how close your assumptions came to killing all of us." She left them there and walked through the medical facility's corridors toward the exit. Master Chief Hayes was waiting outside, leaning against a wall with the patient posture of someone who'd learned to wait. "Phoenix returns from the dead," he said. "Again. Seems to be a habit." "How are you really?" Sarah considered the question honestly. "Tired, sore, reminded of why I spent 8 years avoiding this. And reminded of why I did it in the first place." She looked at Hayes. "Reynolds is going to be fine. His team is going to recover. Carson, Matthews, and Torres learned something that might save lives down the road. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything, Commander. That's the whole point of service." They stood in silence for a moment, watching personnel move through the facility with the organized chaos of military medical care. You know what the hardest part is, Sarah said finally. Not the combat, not the risk, not even the fear. It's knowing that no matter how many people you save, you can't save everyone. Martinez is still dead. Those 3 operators in Moscow are still gone, and no amount of successful missions changes that. No, Hayes agreed. But every successful mission means someone else goes home. Someone else's family doesn't get that terrible visit. Someone else's story doesn't end in a cemetery. He pushed off the wall. That's not nothing, Commander. That's everything. Sarah nodded slowly. James used to say the same thing. Your husband was a smart man. You should listen to his ghost more often. Maybe I will. Hayes started to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Commander Chen called. The evaluation program is being restructured. Apparently someone impressed some very important people with her performance under pressure. They want you to help design the new curriculum. They want Phoenix Protocol incorporated into standard training. Among other things, but mostly they want operators who understand that capability comes in unexpected packages. Who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll have a military that actually judges people on merit instead of assumptions. That's optimistic. I'm old enough to be optimistic. You should try it sometime. He left and Sarah was alone with her thoughts and the distant sound of helicopters bringing more casualties from somewhere else in the world. The work never stopped. The threats never ended. The mission continued regardless of who carried it forward. She thought about Carson Matthews and Torres, how they'd entered the training room as arrogant operators and emerged from Yemen as something more complete. She thought about Reynolds and his team, about Martinez who died protecting his leader. She thought about the 3 operators from Moscow whose names were carved in granite at CIA headquarters. And she thought about the choice she'd made 8 years ago to stop being Phoenix, to step back from the edge to protect herself from the cost of service. That choice suddenly felt less certain than it had this morning. Sarah pulled out her secure phone and composed a message to Director Moss. Regarding your question about active status, I'm considering it. Give me 2 weeks to decide. She hit send before she could change her mind, then walked into the night where a transport was waiting to take her back to Fort Coronado and whatever came next. The transport touched down at Fort Coronado 18 hours after they'd left Yemen. Sarah had spent the flight alternating between sleep and reviewing mission reports, her mind refusing to fully shut down, despite her body's demands for rest. Carson Matthews and Torres had been quiet for most of the journey, processing what they'd experienced in ways that would take weeks or months to fully understand. As they exited the aircraft, Commander Chen was waiting on the tarmac with Master Chief Hayes. Chen's expression was unreadable, but Hayes looked pleased in that subtle way career military professionals showed approval. Commander Mitchell, Chen said, my office. Now, you 3. He nodded at the SEALs. Medical evaluation, then 48 hours liberty. After that, we'll debrief the Yemen operation in detail. Carson started to protest. Sir, we'd like to participate in Commander Mitchell's debrief. That wasn't a request, Lieutenant. Dismissed. The 3 SEALs exchanged glances but followed orders, heading toward the medical building. Sarah fell in step with Chen and Hayes, and they walked in silence until they reached the administration building. Chen's office was exactly as Sarah remembered from 2 days ago. Functional, efficient, decorated with commendations that spoke to a career built on competence rather than politics. He closed the door and gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. I've received 14 calls in the last 6 hours. Chen began, his voice carefully neutral. 5 from SOCOM Command, 3 from Naval Intelligence, 2 from the Secretary of the Navy's office, and 4 from agencies whose names I'm not cleared to mention. They all want to know the same thing: who is Phoenix, and why wasn't she available for operations that needed exactly her skill set? Phoenix is retired, Commander, or was retired until approximately 36 hours ago. Retired personnel don't execute high-risk extractions against overwhelming odds. Chen pulled up a file on his computer. I've been reading your classified service record. The parts I have clearance for anyway. 89 successful extractions. 23 eliminated threats. 0 failed missions until Moscow in 2017. Then nothing. 8 years of intelligence analysis and training development, but no field operations. Care to explain? Sarah had known this conversation was coming. She'd spent 8 years avoiding it, deflecting it, burying it under classification protocols and bureaucratic barriers. But Chen had earned a straight answer. Moscow was a hard target extraction that went wrong. We got the asset out, but I lost 3 operators doing it. Good people, skilled professionals. They died because I made a tactical decision that prioritized the mission over their safety. That's what operators do, Hayes said quietly. They understand the risks. Understanding risks doesn't make the outcome acceptable, Master Chief. Those 3 operators had families, careers, futures. They gave all of that up because I told them the mission required it. Chen leaned back in his chair. And you've been punishing yourself ever since by refusing field assignments. I've been ensuring I don't put anyone else in that position. Yet you just led 3 SEALs into Yemen on a mission with a 35% success probability. How is that different? The question hit harder than Sarah expected. Because they volunteered knowing the odds. Because the alternative was letting Reynolds and his team die. Because sometimes the mission requires risk, and leaders have to make impossible choices. Chen interrupted. Commander, I've read the Moscow after-action reports. All of them, including the classified annexes. You gave those 3 operators multiple opportunities to withdraw. They chose to stay. They chose to execute the diversion that saved the asset and half the team. That was their decision, not yours. I was the team leader. Ultimately, every decision was mine. And ultimately, you succeeded in an impossible mission and saved 4 lives while losing 3. That's not failure, Commander. That's the terrible mathematics of warfare. Chen stood and walked to the window. The reason I'm telling you this, the reason 14 different commanders and directors are calling me, is because we need Phoenix. Not retired, not consulting from a safe distance, but active and operational. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Commander, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but nothing. You just demonstrated capabilities we desperately need. The world hasn't gotten safer in the 8 years you've been behind a desk. If anything, it's gotten more dangerous, more complex, requiring exactly the kind of unconventional thinking you bring to operations. Hayes cleared his throat. Commander Mitchell, there's something else you should know. Carson Matthews and Torres filed their preliminary reports during the flight back. I've read them. They're requesting to be permanently assigned to your unit. I don't have a unit, Master Chief. You do now, Chen said, turning from the window. Task Force Sentinel is being activated. 12 operators cross-trained in intelligence and tactical operations designed for high-risk scenarios that don't fit conventional response parameters. You're being offered command. The words seemed to echo in the small office. Sarah processed the implications, returning to active field status, taking responsibility for 12 operators, putting herself back in positions where people died because of her decisions. I need time to consider this. You have 48 hours. After that, I need an answer. Chen returned to his desk. Dismissed, Commander. Sarah left the office and found herself walking without conscious direction, her feet carrying her across the base toward the Pacific Ocean. The morning sun was bright and the salt air helped clear her mind of the Yemen operation's residual adrenaline. She reached the beach and stood watching waves crash against the shore with the relentless rhythm that had existed long before humans invented warfare and would continue long after. The ocean didn't care about tactical decisions or moral dilemmas. It just continued indifferent and eternal. Figured I'd find you here. Sarah turned to see Reynolds approaching his arm in a sling, and his face showing the pallor of someone who'd lost too much blood recently. He moved carefully, favoring his left side where the worst of his wounds had been. You should be in medical, Sarah said. I should be dead. Figured I'd take a walk instead. He stood beside her, looking out at the water. I wanted to thank you. Properly. Not during a firefight or in a debriefing room, but just thank you for coming to get us, for risking everything when you didn't have to. You did the same for me in Moscow. That was different. I was following orders. You volunteered for a mission that could have ended your career or your life, Because you remembered that I carried you to a helicopter 8 years ago. Sarah picked up a stone and threw it into the surf. It wasn't just about you, Reynolds. It was about proving something to myself. That I could still do this. That Moscow didn't break me permanently. Did you prove it? I proved I can still execute missions. Whether I should is a different question. Reynolds was quiet for a moment, watching the waves. Martinez, the operator, we lost. He had a wife and 2 kids, 8 and 6 years old. I'm going to have to visit them, explain how their father died protecting his team. I've done it before, but it never gets easier. It shouldn't get easier. The day it becomes routine is the day you've lost something essential. Is that why you stopped after Moscow? Because it was getting too easy to accept casualties? Sarah considered the question. I stopped because I was afraid. Not of dying, but of becoming someone who made life and death decisions without feeling the weight. Someone who could send operators into danger and sleep well afterward. You think that's what you were becoming? I think that's what I was terrified of becoming. So I stepped back, took desk assignments, convinced myself I was serving by analyzing instead of acting. Reynolds turned to face her directly. And now, after Yemen, what are you afraid of now? Same thing, different context. Chen offered me command of Task Force Sentinel. 12 operators under my leadership running missions that will inevitably put them at risk. Are you going to accept? I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes immediately to prove that Moscow was an exception rather than my limit. But another part remembers those 3 operators, and Martinez and everyone else who didn't come home, and wonders if I have the right to make those decisions anymore. Reynolds picked up his own stone and threw it, grimacing at the pain the motion caused. Can I tell you something my first team leader told me? Something that stuck with me through 3 tours and more operations than I can count. Go ahead. He said that leadership isn't about being certain. It's about being willing to make decisions when certainty isn't possible. The leaders who wait for perfect information, who hesitate because they're afraid of being wrong, they get people killed through inaction. The leaders who accept imperfect information and make the best call they can, they save more lives than they lose even when the losses hurt. That sounds like something James would have said. Your husband was my instructor at Buds. That's where I first heard it. Reynolds smiled slightly. He also said that the best leaders are the ones who feel the weight of every decision, because that weight keeps them sharp, keeps them caring about outcomes, instead of just completing missions. Sarah felt tears threatening and pushed them back. James died because he felt that weight. He put himself between your convoy and an IED because he believed his life was worth less than the 12 people he was protecting. He died because he was a leader who understood sacrifice, same as Martinez, same as those 3 operators in Moscow. Reynolds's voice was gentle but firm. You can honor their sacrifice by refusing to lead again, by protecting yourself from the pain of loss. Or you can honor it by continuing to do what they believed was worth dying for, protecting people who can't protect themselves. Before Sarah could respond, her phone vibrated. A message from Director Moss. Medical Facility Walter Reed. Need to see you immediately. It's about your son. The words hit like physical impact. Sarah's son, David Mitchell, Marine Corps captain, currently deployed to an undisclosed location in the Pacific Theater. The son she'd lost, her husband, protecting the son who'd followed his father into service despite her attempts to convince him otherwise. I have to go, Sarah said, her voice tight. Reynolds saw her expression. What's wrong? I don't know, but I need to get to Walter Reed. Now. The flight to Washington took 6 hours that felt like days. Sarah spent every minute imagining scenarios each worse than the last. David injured, David captured, David dead. The possibilities spiraled through her mind with the clarity and precision she normally reserved for tactical analysis. Master Chief Hayes had arranged priority transport and a car was waiting when she landed. The driver took her directly to Walter Reed's secure medical wing, where Director Moss was waiting in a private consultation room. Director. Sarah's voice was steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her. Where's my son? He's alive, Moss said, immediately understanding a mother's priorities. Injured but stable. He's in surgery now. Doctors are optimistic. The relief was physical, weakening her knees. Sarah sat down before they could give out. What happened? His unit was conducting reconnaissance near a disputed island chain. They encountered a Chinese special operations team. There was an engagement. David took 2 rounds, one in the shoulder, one in the abdomen. His team extracted him, but it was close. How close? His corpsman said he had maybe 10 minutes before he would have bled out. But he's young, strong, and stubborn. Apparently runs in the family. Moss pulled up a chair. There's more. During the engagement, David's unit captured intelligence indicating a broader Chinese operation in the region. Something big. The kind of thing that requires immediate response from personnel with specific skill sets. Sarah looked at him, understanding immediately. You want Phoenix for another mission. I want Phoenix to lead the mission that responds to what your son discovered. But I understand if that's asking too much. You're damn right it's asking too much. My son is in surgery fighting for his life, and you're recruiting me for a mission in the same theater where he was nearly killed. Moss didn't flinch from her anger. I'm recruiting you because the intelligence David obtained is time-sensitive and critical. Because 12 hours from now, Chinese forces are going to establish a permanent presence that will threaten every American asset in the Pacific. And because you're the only operator I trust to handle this without turning it into World War III. Find someone else. There is no one else. Phoenix Protocol exists precisely for situations like this, complex, politically sensitive, requiring surgical precision and absolute discretion. Sarah stood and walked to the window overlooking the medical campus. Somewhere in this building, her son was on an operating table, surgeons working to repair damage from an operation that had nearly cost his life. And Moss was asking her to go back into the field that had nearly taken her son, her husband, and too many others. What's the timeline? Briefing in 6 hours. Mission launch in 12. You'd be back before David's out of recovery. And if something goes wrong, if I don't come back, then David wakes up and learns his mother died doing what she believed was right. Same lesson he learned when his father died. Moss's voice softened. Sarah, I know what I'm asking. I know the cost. But this isn't about convenience or career advancement. This is about preventing a conflict that could cost thousands of lives, including your son's, if he's redeployed to that region. A doctor appeared at the door, still in surgical scrubs. Commander Mitchell, your son is out of surgery. He's stable and the prognosis is good. He should make a full recovery. The relief was overwhelming. Sarah closed her eyes and breathed for what felt like the first time in hours. Can I see him? He's in recovery now. Should be conscious in an hour or 2. You can wait in his room if you'd like. Sarah followed the doctor through sterile hallways to a private room where her son would be brought after recovery. She sat in the chair beside the empty bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 72 hours. 3 days ago, she'd been preparing for a routine evaluation. Now, she'd dismantled 3 SEALs, led a rescue mission in Yemen, been offered command of a task force, and was sitting in a hospital room waiting to see her son, who'd nearly died in combat. Her phone vibrated. A message from Carson. Commander heard about your son. If there's anything we can do, we're ready. All 3 of us. Another message from Matthews. Praying for your son's recovery, ma'am. You taught us what service means. Now let us serve you. A third from Torres. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. No hesitation. You have our word. Sarah stared at the messages, feeling something shift inside her. These 3 men who'd mocked her, underestimated her, called her useless. They were now offering unconditional support in her moment of need. Not because they owed her, but because she'd shown them what leadership actually looked like. The door opened and orderlies wheeled David in, still unconscious from anesthesia. Sarah stood and moved to his side, taking his hand. He looked young, despite being 30 years old, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him since childhood. David, she whispered. I'm here. You're safe. You're going to be fine. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Mom, I'm here, baby. Don't try to talk. Just rest. The mission. Did they get the intel? They got it. You did good. Dad would be proud. His eyes were already closing again, the medication pulling him back under. He would be. I am too. David drifted back into sleep, and Sarah stood there holding his hand, thinking about the mission Moss had described, thinking about the 12 operators who would comprise Task Force Sentinel, thinking about Carson Matthews and Torres who were ready to serve despite everything, thinking about James who died believing that some things were worth the sacrifice. Director Moss appeared in the doorway. "I can give you more time. The briefing can wait." Sarah looked at her son, then at Moss. "No. If the timeline is critical, we can't delay. Brief me now while David's sleeping. I'll make my decision after I hear the details." They moved to a secure conference room where Moss laid out the situation. Chinese forces had established a forward operating base on a disputed island, claiming it as a weather station, but clearly positioning it as a military asset. The intelligence David's unit had captured indicated the installation included advanced radar systems, missile batteries, and facilities for submarine operations. If they complete this installation, it gives them monitoring capability over the entire Western Pacific shipping lanes. American naval operations become exponentially more complicated. Moss pulled up satellite imagery. The installation is heavily defended, politically sensitive, and absolutely critical to regional security. What's the objective? Disable the radar and missile systems without killing Chinese personnel if possible. We want to send a message about capabilities without triggering a diplomatic crisis. Sarah studied the imagery. You want Phoenix to infiltrate a Chinese military base, sabotage critical systems, and exit without causing casualties in 12 hours. I want Phoenix to do what Phoenix does best, find the impossible solution that no one else can see. And the team, your choice. I can provide specialists from any unit in the military. Sarah thought about the message from Carson Matthews and Torres, thought about what they'd learned in Yemen, thought about the kind of operators she'd need for a mission that required absolute trust and zero ego. I want the 3 SEALs from the evaluation. Carson Matthews and Torres. Moss raised an eyebrow. The ones you hospitalized 2 days ago. The ones who learned humility the hard way. The ones who just proved they understand what service means. Sarah pulled up their service records. They're skilled, adaptable, and most importantly, they've been broken and rebuilt in the last 72 hours. They won't question orders based on prejudice. They'll execute based on trust. You're sure about this? I'm sure that if I'm going back into the field, I'm doing it with operators I've personally vetted under fire. Those 3 earned their place. Moss considered this, then nodded. I'll authorize it. But you need to understand something, Sarah. This isn't a one-time operation. If you accept this mission, if you prove Phoenix is still operational, you're going to be called on again and again. The threats don't stop. The missions don't end. You'll be choosing a life where every decision carries weight and every operation risks lives. I understand. Do you? Because 8 years ago, you walked away from this specifically to avoid that weight. What's changed? Sarah looked through the window toward the room where her son slept, recovering from wounds suffered in service to his country. What's changed is, I remembered something my husband used to say, that the weight of command isn't a burden to avoid, it's a responsibility to embrace. That leaders who feel the cost of every decision make better choices than leaders who've learned to ignore it. James was right about that. He was right about a lot of things, including the fact that some fights are worth fighting even when the cost is high. Sarah turned back to Moss. I'm accepting command of Task Force Sentinel. I'm leading the mission to that Chinese installation, and I'm doing it with 3 SEALs who understand what it means to be wrong and still show up ready to serve. Moss extended his hand. Welcome back, Phoenix. Let's go save the Pacific. Sarah shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision settle over her like armor. It was familiar, heavy, and somehow right. She returned to David's room and sat with him for another hour, watching him sleep, memorizing his face the way she had when he was a child. When his eyes opened again, more alert this time, she squeezed his hand. Mom, you're still here. Where else would I be? I thought maybe you'd have work. You always have work. Not today. Today I'm right here. David smiled weakly. I heard what happened in Yemen. Reynolds called me before the mission. Said you were coming to get him. Said you were going back to being Phoenix. You knew about that. Mom, everyone in the special operations community knows about Phoenix. We just didn't know it was you until recently." He coughed, winced at the pain. "I'm glad you're back. The world needs Phoenix, needs you doing what you do best. Even if it means I'm in danger. Even then, because you taught me something even when you were trying to convince me not to serve. You taught me that some things matter more than safety, that protecting people who can't protect themselves is worth the risk." Sarah felt tears finally breaking through her control. "Your father would be so proud of you. He'd be proud of both of us, doing what needs doing even when it's hard." They sat in silence for a while, mother and son both warriors in their own right, both carrying scars from battles fought for beliefs that mattered more than comfort. Finally, David spoke again. "Go do what you need to do, Mom. I'll be fine. I've got good doctors and better drugs. You've got a mission and people counting on you. I'll be back before you're discharged. I know you will, because that's what Phoenix does. She completes missions and comes home." Sarah kissed her son's forehead and left the hospital feeling lighter despite the weight of command settling back onto her shoulders. She had a mission to plan operators to brief and 12 hours to prepare for an operation that would either prevent a regional conflict or trigger one. But for the first time in 8 years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The briefing room at Fort Coronado was full when Sarah arrived. Carson Matthews and Torres sat in the front row, their faces serious but alert. Behind them, Commander Chen and Master Chief Hayes represented institutional authority. And on the video screen, Director Moss waited with the patience of someone who'd orchestrated exactly this outcome. Sarah stood at the front of the room and looked at the 3 SEALs who'd called her useless just days ago. "Gentlemen, we have a mission. It's dangerous, politically sensitive, and has approximately 40% odds of success. You're not required to volunteer. But if you do, you're committing to following my orders without question, trusting my judgment even when it seems insane, and accepting that this won't be the last time I ask you to risk everything." Carson stood. "I'm in, Commander. No hesitation." Matthews stood. "Me too. Whatever you need." Torres was last to stand. "You've earned our trust, Phoenix. We won't let you down." Sarah felt something settle into place, not certainty, not confidence, but purpose. The same purpose that had driven her for 28 years, that had survived Moscow and 8 years behind a desk that had been waiting for her to remember why it mattered. "Then let's get to work. We have 12 hours to prepare for an impossible mission. And I intend to prove that impossible is just another word for difficult." She activated the tactical display and began the briefing that would either save the Pacific Theater or destroy her career. Either way, Phoenix was flying again. The mission brief took 2 hours, and by the end, Carson Matthews and Torres understood exactly how impossible their task was. Infiltrate a Chinese military installation on a disputed island, disable radar and missile systems without killing personnel, and extract before anyone realized they'd been there. All within a 6-hour operational window. "The key is timing," Sarah explained, pointing to satellite thermal imagery. "Guard rotations occur every 4 hours. During the changeover, there's a 7-minute gap where sections of the perimeter are minimally monitored. We exploit that gap." Matthews studied the facility layout. "Even with perfect timing, we're talking about penetrating 3 security layers: electronic, physical, and personnel. Any one of those fails, we're compromised, which is why we're not penetrating them conventionally. We're using the installation's own systems against it." Sarah pulled up technical schematics. Chinese military doctrine prioritizes centralized command and control. Everything routes through their main operations center. We access that we control everything. Torres leaned forward. "You're talking about hacking their network from inside the facility, while avoiding detection by armed guards. I'm talking about using Phoenix protocol to create opportunities that shouldn't exist. The electronic warfare component is just one element." Carson's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued. "What's the full plan?" Sarah walked them through every phase: submarine insertion 3 kilometers offshore, underwater approach to avoid radar detection, surface infiltration, During the guard rotation gap, accessing the operations center through a ventilation system that intelligence indicated was inadequately secured, uploading malware that would disable systems while creating false operational data to mask the sabotage and exfiltration before anyone realized what had happened. "This is insane," Matthew said quietly. "I mean, I'm in, but this is absolutely insane." Insane is just another word for creative problem solving under pressure. Sarah met each of their eyes. "I need to know right now if any of you have doubts. Not about the mission's difficulty, but about your ability to follow orders when your instincts scream at you to do something different." The three SEALs exchanged glances, communicating in that wordless way operators developed after years of working together. Finally, Carson spoke for all of them. "Commander, 3 days ago we thought we knew everything. You showed us we knew nothing. Yemen taught us that following your orders keeps us alive even when logic says we're dead. So, no, we don't have doubts. We have questions, we have concerns, but we trust you'll get us through this." Good. Because in 8 hours, we're boarding that submarine and there's no backing out after that. They spent the remaining time preparing equipment, running through rehearsals, and memorizing every detail of the installation layout. Sarah worked with an intensity that surprised even herself. She'd forgotten how much she thrived in this space where everything mattered and every decision rippled outward in ways that could save or cost lives. Master Chief Hayes found her in the equipment room at 0200 hours, checking her gear for the 3rd time. "Can't sleep. Sleep's overrated when lives depend on precision." Hayes picked up one of her tools, a sophisticated electronic warfare device disguised as a standard communications unit. "I've been doing this for 43 years, Commander. I've seen a lot of operators trained more than I can count. You know what separates the good ones from the great ones." "What's that, Master Chief?" "Good ones focus on not dying. Great ones focus on making sure everyone else survives." He set the device down carefully. "You're one of the great ones, Sarah. Your husband knew it. Reynolds knows it. Those 3 SEALs are starting to understand it. James died being great, Master Chief. Sometimes I wonder if good wouldn't have been enough. Your husband died choosing to protect 12 Marines over himself. That wasn't stupidity or recklessness. That was math. 1 life for 12. He made the calculation we all make when we accept this job." Sarah stopped her equipment check. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life, knowing what it costs?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Every single day. And every single day I choose it again. Because the alternative is letting someone else bear the weight, and I'm too stubborn to pass that burden on." "That's not healthy, Master Chief." "No, it's not. But it's honest. And honesty is the only thing that keeps us from becoming monsters who send people to die without feeling it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your son's going to be fine, by the way. I checked with Walter Reed. He's asking for you. I'll call him before we launch." "Good, because that boy worships you even if he doesn't say it. Needs to hear his mother's voice before she does something crazy." Sarah called David from the secure communications room 40 minutes before departure. He answered on the 2nd ring, sounding more alert than someone recovering from surgery should. "Mom, Hayes said you were calling. How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot twice, which is accurate. But the doctors say I'm doing great, should be discharged in a few days." He paused. "You're going on a mission, aren't you? I can hear it in your voice." "I can't talk about operational details." "You don't have to. I know that tone. That's your pre-mission voice. The one where you're running through every contingency, calculating every risk, preparing to do something impossible." Sarah smiled despite herself. "When did you get so good at reading me? I had a good teacher. Dad used to do the same thing, get this focused quality in his voice right before operations, like he was already 3 steps ahead, seeing outcomes before they happened." David's voice softened. "Be careful out there, Mom. The world needs Phoenix, but I need my mother more." "I'm always careful." "You're always competent. That's different from careful." "Fair point." Sarah checked her watch. "I need to go soon, but David, I want you to know something. What you did the mission, where you got hurt, that took courage. Real courage. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. I learned from the best. You learned from your father. I learned from both of you. Dad taught me about sacrifice. You taught me about persistence. Between the two of you, I never had a chance to be anything other than stubborn and reckless." Sarah laughed, the sound feeling strange after so much intensity. "That's a fair assessment. Listen, I'll call you as soon as I can after I get back. I'll be waiting. And Mom, come home. That's an order from your son." "I always follow orders from commanding officers, Captain Mitchell." They said goodbye, and Sarah sat in the silence of the communications room, letting herself feel the full weight of what she was about to do. A mission that could prevent war or trigger it. 4 lives in her hands, including her own. And a son waiting for her to come home. The submarine journey took 4 hours through waters that had become increasingly contested as Chinese and American naval forces positioned for advantage. Sarah spent the time in meditation, a practice she'd learned from a Japanese martial arts instructor decades ago, clearing her mind, focusing her intent, preparing for the flow state that Phoenix Protocol required. Carson found her in the small space they'd been allocated for pre-mission prep. "Commander, can I ask something that's been bothering me?" "Go ahead." "In the training room when you took us down, you could have hurt us much worse. Could have broken bones, caused real damage. But you didn't. Why?" Sarah considered the question. "Because breaking you would have taught you nothing except to fear me. I needed you to respect capability, not fear consequences. There's a difference. And in Yemen, when you put al-Rifai down, that was different. In Yemen, he was an active threat in a combat zone. The calculus changes when lives are at stake." Carson sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about that. About how you adjust to context, how you read situations and respond with exactly the right level of force. That's not just training. That's philosophy. Phoenix Protocol is both. The physical techniques are just manifestations of underlying principles. Control over chaos, precision over power, options over elimination. Can you teach us that? Not just the moves, but the thinking behind them." Sarah looked at this man who'd called her useless 4 days ago and now wanted to learn from her. "If we survive this mission, if Task Force Sentinel becomes operational, that's exactly what I'll teach you, all of you. How to be operators who think 3 moves ahead and always leave room for better outcomes." "I'd like that. We all would." The submarine surfaced 3 kilometers from the target island at 0300 hours. Sarah and her team transferred to the water in complete darkness, their rebreathers allowing silent underwater approach. The swim took 42 minutes, and they emerged exactly where intelligence had predicted, a rocky section of shoreline with minimal surveillance coverage. They cached their swim gear and moved inland, using night vision and thermal imaging to avoid detection. The installation was a quarter-mile from shore, surrounded by chain-link fencing guard towers and roving patrols. "Guard rotation in 4 minutes. Matthews whispered, checking his watch. Sarah had them positioned at 3 different points along the perimeter. When the rotation began, they had exactly 7 minutes to exploit the coverage gap. She moved first, cutting through the fence with bolt cutters designed to leave minimal evidence. Carson followed, then Torres, then Matthews. They were inside. The operations center was in the installation's center, a 2-story building that housed command and control systems. Sarah led them through shadows and blind spots, her movements informed by weeks of studying guard patterns from satellite footage. They reached the ventilation access point, a maintenance shaft that intelligence indicated connected to the operations center's server room. Sarah went in first, the space barely wide enough for her small frame. Behind her, the 3 larger SEALs struggled but managed. 15 minutes of crawling through tight spaces, and they emerged in a mechanical room adjacent to the server area. Sarah could hear voices through the wall, 2 technicians speaking Mandarin, complaining about night shift duty. She signaled the others to wait and approached the door. Through a small window, she could see the server room, rows of equipment, blinking lights, and 2 very bored technicians who would be a problem if they weren't handled correctly. Sarah opened the door slowly and stepped inside. The technicians looked up, startled, reaching for alarm buttons. She spoke in perfect Mandarin. "Don't. I'm not here to hurt you, just to deliver a message." The older technician's hand hovered over the alarm. "Who are you?" "Someone who's going to disable your radar systems. You can raise the alarm and die, or you can sit quietly and live. Your choice." The younger technician started to move and Sarah was across the room before he completed the motion. She had him in a control hold, not hurting him, but demonstrating absolute capability. I said, don't. Listen carefully. In 30 seconds, your systems are going to experience what looks like a cascade failure. Nothing permanent, nothing that can't be fixed. But for the next 6 hours, your installation will be blind. You're going to report this as a technical malfunction. No intrusion, no sabotage, just bad luck and old equipment. Why would we do that? The older technician asked. Because if you report an intrusion, your commanders will launch an investigation. That investigation will reveal security failures, inadequate protocols, and the fact that 2 technicians couldn't prevent a 52-year-old woman from walking through your defenses. You'll be blamed, possibly imprisoned. Or you can report a technical failure which isn't your fault and everyone keeps their jobs. The technicians exchanged glances, calculating their options. Sarah released the younger one and pulled out her electronic warfare device. I'm uploading the malware now. It's going to look exactly like a hardware failure. Your diagnostic systems will confirm it. You'll spend the next few hours trying to fix something that will mysteriously resolve itself after we're long gone. This is an act of war, the older technician said quietly. This is an act of restraint. If I wanted war, you'd both be dead and this facility would be a crater. Instead, you get a technical malfunction and a story about the night your equipment failed. That's a much better outcome for everyone. She connected the device to their network and began the upload. Carson, Matthews, and Torres entered the room, weapons ready but not threatening. The technicians sat very still, making no moves. The upload completed in 4 minutes. Sarah disconnected and pocketed the device. Your systems will start failing in 90 seconds. Remember, technical malfunction, nothing more. They left the same way they'd entered, moving through ventilation shafts and emerging into the mechanical room. Behind them, Sarah could hear alarms starting to sound. Not security alarms, but system failure warnings. Perfect. They reached the perimeter fence and slipped through, moving quickly toward the shoreline. Behind them, the installation was lit up, personnel rushing to respond to what appeared to be catastrophic equipment failure. Phoenix, this is too easy, Torres said as they reached the water. They're going to figure out it was sabotage. Maybe, but by then we'll be gone and they'll have no proof, no casualties, no obvious intrusion, just systems that mysteriously failed and mysteriously recovered. They'll suspect, but suspicion without evidence is just paranoia. They swam back to the submarine rendezvous point and were extracted exactly on schedule. The submarine dove and headed for international waters, and Sarah finally allowed herself to believe they'd succeeded. Carson approached her in the cramped crew quarters. That was brilliant, how you handled those technicians, giving them a reason to cooperate instead of forcing them. That's Phoenix protocol, isn't it? Creating better options. It's understanding that violence is the last tool, not the first one. Those technicians weren't threats, they were obstacles. I removed the obstacle without creating casualties. Matthews joined them. What happens when the Chinese figure out what we did? They'll strengthen their security, change their protocols, and be more cautious, which is exactly what we want. This mission wasn't about destroying capability. It was about demonstrating that we can reach it whenever we want. That's deterrence. Torres was the last to arrive, and his expression was troubled. Commander, can I ask something that's going to sound disrespectful? You've earned the right to ask hard questions, Chief. That technique you used, control without harm persuasion, instead of violence, could you have done that in Yemen? With al-Rifai's forces? Sarah understood what he was really asking. Yemen was different. Al-Rifai's forces were actively trying to kill Reynolds and his team. They'd already killed one operator. The context demanded a different response. So, Phoenix Protocol isn't about avoiding violence. It's about matching response to context. Exactly. Sometimes the mission requires force. Sometimes it requires restraint. The skill is knowing which is which and having the capability to execute either. The submarine journey back took 6 hours. Sarah used the time to write her after-action report, documenting every decision, every calculated risk, every moment where choices created outcomes. It was thorough, detailed, and would likely be classified above the level where anyone could actually read it. They docked at 0900 hours and Commander Chen was waiting with Master Chief Hayes and Director Moss. All three looked pleased in that subtle way senior military personnel showed approval. Mission success, Chen said. It wasn't a question. Radar and missile systems disabled. 0 casualties. 0 evidence of American involvement beyond circumstantial suspicion. The Chinese are scrambling to fix what looks like equipment failure. Ma smiled slightly. We're monitoring their communications. They're furious but confused. Can't prove it was us, can't ignore that it happened. Perfect outcome. How's my son? Sarah asked. Recovering well, asking for you. I told him you'd be there by 1400 hours. Moss pulled out a tablet. Before you go, I need your signature on something. Your official appointment as commander of Task Force Sentinel. Full operational authority reporting directly to me with clearance to recruit personnel from any branch of service. Sarah took the tablet and looked at the document. It was everything she'd walked away from 8 years ago: field operations, life and death decisions, the weight of command settling back onto her shoulders. She signed without hesitation. Welcome back, Phoenix. For real this time. Thank you, Director. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a son to see and a team to debrief. She found Carson Matthews and Torres in the debriefing room already writing their reports. They looked up as she entered, and something had changed in how they looked at her. Not fear, not awe, just respect earned through shared experience. Gentlemen, I need to tell you something. Task Force Sentinel is now operational. I'm offering all 3 of you positions on the team. It's voluntary, it's dangerous, and it will require you to unlearn some things the SEALs taught you while learning new approaches that might seem counterintuitive. Carson stood. I'm in, no hesitation. Matthews nodded. Same. I want to learn everything you can teach. Torres took longer, his expression thoughtful. Commander, 3 days ago, I thought I knew what strength was, what being a warrior meant. You've completely rewritten my understanding. So, yes, I'm in. Because I want to be the operator you're training us to become. Good. Report to Fort Coronado in 1 week. We've got a facility, a mission set, and a lot of work to do. Dismissed. They left, and Sarah was alone with her thoughts and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the right one. She drove to Walter Reed and found David sitting up in bed looking much better than he had 12 hours ago. His face lit up when he saw her. You're back, and you're not shot, which is a good sign. I told you I'd be careful. You told me you'd be competent. I'm choosing to believe that included careful. He gestured to the chair. Sit. Tell me everything you can without violating classification protocols. Sarah sat and considered what she could say. I led a mission with 3 operators who 4 days ago thought I was useless. We succeeded in an objective that should have been impossible. 0 casualties. Mission complete. And I remembered why I do this. Why your father did this. Why you do this. Because someone has to, and we're capable, so we bear the weight. David reached for her hand. Dad would be proud. I'm proud. You came back. That's what matters. I'll always come back, David. That's a promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Mom. We both know this job doesn't work that way. Then I promise I'll do everything in my power to come back. How's that? Better. More honest. He squeezed her hand. I'm getting deployed again in 3 months. Different theater, different mission. But I wanted you to know I'm not scared. Not because I'm reckless, but because you taught me how to be scared and still function. That's a gift. Sarah felt tears threatening again. Your father taught you that, not me. You both did. Together. Even though he's gone, you're still teaching me. Still showing me what service looks like. David's voice was quiet but firm. So go do what you need to do. Lead your team. Train your operators. Be Phoenix. I'll be fine. Because I learned from the best. They sat together for another hour talking about everything and nothing. Mother and son, both warriors. Both understanding that the path they'd chosen came with costs, but also with purpose. When Sarah finally left, she drove back to Fort Coronado and stood on the beach watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The same ocean where her husband had died. The same ocean her son had nearly died protecting. The same ocean she'd just crossed to prevent a conflict that could have cost thousands of lives. Master Chief Hayes found her there, moving with that unhurried pace of someone who'd learned patience through decades of service. "Thought I'd find you here. Seems to be my spot for thinking. Good spot for it. Water keeps moving reminds you nothing stays the same." He stood beside her. "Your team's been asking about training schedules. They're eager to start. We'll begin next week. Intensive program. 6 months of training before their first real mission. They'll be ready. You'll make sure of it." Sarah turned to look at him. "Master Chief, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever wonder if we're making a difference? If all these missions, all these sacrifices, do they actually matter in the long run?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves. "Every single day, Commander. And every single day I decide they do. Because the alternative is believing that good people died for nothing, and I refuse to believe that. That's faith, not certainty. Faith is all we've got sometimes. Faith that doing the right thing matters even when we can't see the results. Faith that protecting people who can't protect themselves is worth the cost. Faith that the next generation operators like your son, like Carson and Matthews and Torres, will carry this forward when we're gone." Sarah nodded slowly. "James used to say something similar, that we don't serve for recognition or reward. We serve because the work needs doing, and we're capable of doing it. Your husband was a wise man. He was. And he paid the price for that wisdom. We all pay that price, Commander. The only question is whether we pay it doing something that matters." Hayes turned to face her directly. "You've got 12 operators waiting to learn from you. You've got missions that will save lives. You've got a son who's going to follow your example, regardless of what you do. The question is, what are you going to show him?" Sarah looked back at the ocean, at the endless movement of water that had witnessed countless human struggles and would witness countless more. She thought about James, about the 3 operators lost in Moscow, about Martinez in Yemen, about all the people who'd chosen service over safety. And she thought about Carson, Matthews, and Torres, 3 men who'd learned humility the hard way and emerged better for it. About the 12 operators who would comprise Task Force Sentinel. About David recovering from wounds suffered in service to something larger than himself. "I'm going to show him that service matters, that competence transcends prejudice, that the people you underestimate are often the ones who save your life." Sarah's voice was steady, certain. "I'm going to show him what Phoenix really means. Not a warrior who can't be beaten, but a leader who rises from failure, learns from mistakes, and keeps serving despite the cost." "That's a good answer, Commander." "It's the only answer I've got, Master Chief." They stood together in silence, watching the sun complete its descent, darkness spreading across the water. Somewhere out there, new threats were emerging. New missions were being planned. New operators were preparing for deployments that would test everything they thought they knew. And Sarah Mitchell Phoenix, actual commander of Task Force Sentinel, mother to a Marine captain, widow of a hero, and the woman who'd been called useless just 4 days ago, was ready for all of it. Because she'd learned something crucial in those 4 days. Something that 3 humbled SEALs had helped her remember. Something her husband had always known. Strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up, learning from the fall, and using that knowledge to help others stand. Leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, committed, and willing to bear the weight that others couldn't carry. And service, real service, wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about showing up when the work was hard, staying when others left, and making impossible choices because someone had to and you were capable. Sarah turned from the ocean and walked back toward the base, her stride confident, her purpose clear. She had a team to train, missions to plan, and operators to transform into something better than they'd been. The 3 SEALs who'd laughed at her were now 3 SEALs who'd follow her anywhere. Martinez's sacrifice in Yemen had saved Reynolds and his team. Her son was recovering stronger for having faced mortality and survived. And Phoenix was flying again, not because the world had changed, but because she'd remembered who she was beneath the grief and the guilt and the 8 years of self-imposed exile. The next morning, Sarah stood in front of her new team, Carson Matthews Torres, and 9 other operators who'd been selected for Task Force Sentinel. They looked at her with respect that had been earned through action, not assumed through rank. "Welcome to Task Force Sentinel," she began. "Over the next 6 months, I'm going to teach you everything I know about Phoenix Protocol. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy. How to create options where none exist. How to win without fighting when possible, and how to fight without mercy when necessary. How to be operators who think 3 moves ahead and always leave room for better outcomes." She paused, meeting each of their eyes. 4 days ago, 3 men in this room called me useless. They're here now because they learned that competence doesn't correlate with appearance, that experience matters more than physical strength, and that the people you underestimate are often the ones who save your life. Remember that lesson. Carry it forward. And never forget that the measure of a warrior isn't how many enemies they've defeated, it's how many teammates they've brought home. Carson raised his hand. "Commander, what if we fail? What if we make mistakes?" Sarah smiled slightly. "You will fail. You will make mistakes. The question isn't whether you'll fall, it's whether you'll get back up, learn from the experience, and use that knowledge to be better. That's what Phoenix means. Not a warrior who never loses, but a professional who rises from failure stronger than before." She activated the training program on the display behind her. "Now let's get to work. We have missions to prepare for, lives to protect, and a lot to learn. And gentlemen, from this moment forward, you're not SEALs or Marines or operators from different branches. You're Task Force Sentinel. You're Phoenix Warriors. And you're going to prove that impossible is just another word for a challenge we haven't solved yet." The training began, and Sarah felt the weight of command settle into place like armor she'd been meant to wear all along. Not comfortable, not easy, but right. Because 4 days ago, 3 men had called her useless and laughed at the idea that a 52-year-old woman could teach them anything. Now those same 3 men were committed to following her into situations where failure meant death, because she'd shown them what true strength actually looked like. The measure of worth wasn't in physical dominance or loud declarations. It was in the quiet competence that protected people from threats they'd never know existed, in the wisdom gained through failure, and refined through persistence in the courage to serve despite knowing the cost. Sarah Mitchell had spent 8 years learning that lesson the hard way. Now she would spend the rest of her career teaching it to operators who would carry it forward when she was gone, ensuring that the next generation understood what the previous generation had paid to learn that service to something larger than yourself was the only work that truly mattered, and that the warriors who made the biggest difference were often the ones no one expected to see coming.